In a millionaire's mansion, the silence had been absolute ever since his daughters lost their mother in a tragic accident. No doctor could make them speak, until the day a new maid walked through the gate. With a simple gesture and a forgotten song, she awakened something no one else could reach. And when the girls looked into her eyes and cried out, "Mommy," the impossible transformed into a miracle. It was another scorching hot day in Beverly Hills, the affluent neighborhood in Los Angeles where the Harrison family resided. The three-story mansion, with its 50,000 square feet, stood imposingly at the end of the tree-lined street. On the outside, the impeccable gardens, the infinity pool, and the contemporary architecture exuded luxury and sophistication. Inside, however, a sepulchral silence reigned, contradicting all that grandeur. William Sterling Harrison, at 35, had built a real estate empire that placed him among the most successful entrepreneurs in the United States. His face often graced the covers of business and finance magazines, always with the same serious and determined expression. His professional success, however, contrasted sharply with his personal life. That Tuesday morning, William was in his office on the third floor of the mansion, conducting a video conference with foreign investors. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, custom made by one of the most renowned tailors in Los Angeles. His posture was upright, his voice firm, his arguments precise. Anyone seeing him speak about market expansion, land appreciation, and financial projections would never imagine the weight he carried in his heart. "Mr. Harrison, we need to wrap up this meeting." "You have an appointment in 15 minutes, interrupted Margaret, his executive assistant entering the office discreetly. William nodded, ending the call with a promise to send supplementary documents later that day. As soon as the computer screen went dark, his expression changed completely. His shoulders slumped, his eyes lost their calculated gleam, and the lines on his forehead deepened. "Have you confirmed the time with Dr. Reed?" he asked, running a hand through his dark hair already sprinkled with premature grey strands. "Yes, sir. She is expecting the girls at her office at 2 p.m. The driver is ready." William sighed deeply. She was the 12th specialist he had consulted in 3 years. Pediatric neurologists, child psychiatrists, speech therapists, behavioral therapists, none of them had managed to reverse his twin daughter's mutism. Charlotte and Amelia, only 5 years old, had not uttered a single word in 3 years. The silence had settled into that house on the same day that Eleanor, his wife, had suffered a tragic domestic accident. The girls had witnessed it all, the fall down the marble staircase, the blood spreading across the light-colored floor, the eyes that would never open again. Since then, it was as if their voices had been buried along with their mother. William checked his watch and decided to see his daughters before they left for another fruitless medical appointment. He crossed the hallway, decorated with priceless works of art he no longer noticed, and stopped before the door to the girls' room, decorated in pastel tones with delicate furniture designed exclusively for them. He knocked softly before entering. He found the two of them sitting on the plush carpet, silently playing with dolls. They were identical, with the same curly brown hair framing angelic faces and green eyes, Eleanor's eyes. They wore matching blouse and skirt sets, distinguished only by the colored clip in their hair, pink for Charlotte, lilac for Amelia. "Hello, princesses," William said, crouching beside them. "You're going out with Mrs. Gable in a little while to meet a very nice doctor. She really wants to talk to you." The twins simultaneously raised their eyes to their father, but showed no verbal reaction. Charlotte made a small gesture with her hand, an almost imperceptible wave that her father interpreted as agreement. This was how they communicated, through minimal gestures, glances, small body movements that William had learned to decode over those silent years. Mrs. Gable, the nanny who had cared for the girls since birth, entered the room carrying small backpacks with items to distract the children. She was a middle-aged woman with maternal features and a gentle voice, one of the few people in the house who could elicit any reaction from the twins. "Everything is ready. Mr. Harrison, I promise to bring back good news this time," she said, trying to sound optimistic, although her tone revealed that even she didn't believe it. William kissed each of his daughters on the forehead, inhaling the soft scent of children's shampoo. "Daddy loves you very much. Be good for Dr. Reed, okay?" As he watched the twins leave, holding hands with Mrs. Gable, William felt the familiar tightness in his chest. All his fortune, all his power and influence, none of it could buy what he desired most: to hear his daughter's voices again. Back in his office, he found Margaret organizing a stack of documents. "Another problem, sir. Mrs. Davies has resigned." William frowned. "Mrs. Davies? Why?" "She's worked for the family for over 10 years. Margaret handed him a handwritten letter. "She left this. She said she's very sorry, but she can't work here anymore. She mentioned something about the sadness of the house weighing too heavily on her shoulders." William read the letter quickly. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper who kept the house running impeccably, expressed her regret at leaving her job, but confessed that the atmosphere of the mansion had become suffocating. "It's like living in a mausoleum," she wrote in the letter, "where even footsteps echo too heavily." "Great," William muttered, tossing the letter onto the desk. "Just great. And now what? Who's going to coordinate the entire house?" "I've already started looking for replacements," Margaret replied, efficient as always. "I have 3 interviews scheduled for tomorrow, all with excellent references." William nodded distractedly, turning his attention back to the documents he needed to review before his next meeting. However, his mind remained on his daughters, on the smiles he hadn't seen in years, the voices he hadn't heard, the joy that had vanished from that house the day Eleanor had gone. The next day, while William was in a meeting at his company's office in the city's financial district, Margaret was interviewing candidates for the housekeeper position. The first 2 candidates were middle-aged women with extensive experience in luxury homes, impeccable resumes, and references from traditional Los Angeles families. The third, however, was completely different. Clara Evans was only 28 and had never worked in a mansion of that size. Born in rural North Carolina, she had the soft accent characteristic of the region and a simplicity in her dress and speech that contrasted with the sophistication of the environment. Her resume showed experience in upper-middle-class family homes, nothing comparable to the Harrison standard. "Mrs. Evans, in all honesty, I don't believe your profile suits the needs of this residence," Margaret said, after a brief review of the documents presented. "The mansion has over 30 rooms, a swimming pool, extensive gardens, and a team of staff that needs to be managed. Furthermore, there are 2 small children with special needs." Clara adjusted herself in the chair, her hands clasped in her lap, her gaze steady. "I understand your concern, Miss Margaret, but I believe what I lack in experience with properties of this size, I make up for in dedication and the ability to learn. As for the children, I have a degree in education, although I've never worked professionally in the field due to personal circumstances." There was something in the way Clara spoke, a mixture of humility and determination that piqued Margaret's curiosity. Besides, the first 2 candidates, though qualified, seemed overly rigid, almost cold. Considering the already austere environment of the mansion, perhaps a warmer presence would be beneficial. "Why are you interested in this position specifically?" Margaret questioned. Clara hesitated for a moment, her brown eyes darkening with what seemed to be a painful memory. "I need a new start," she answered simply. "In a new place with new people. And, honestly, I need a salary that will allow me to pay off some debts I've accumulated over the last few years." Margaret studied the young woman for a few moments. There was something about her, a kind of quiet resilience, a tranquil strength that intrigued her. "What kind of debts, if I may ask?" "Medical and funeral expenses, mostly," Clara replied, her voice firm despite the delicate subject. "I lost my husband and my unborn daughter 2 years ago. An accident. The costs were significant." Margaret's visible discomfort made Clara quickly add, "I apologize for being so frank. I didn't intend to bring personal matters into a professional interview. I just wanted to be honest about my situation." Against her better professional judgment, Margaret felt inclined to give the young widow a chance. Something told her that the Harrison mansion, so immersed in silence and pain, could benefit from someone who understood grief intimately. "The job is demanding, Mrs. Evans. Mr. Harrison is a busy man who values efficiency and discretion above all else. The girls, well, the twins don't speak. Not since the accident that took their mother 3 years ago. Several specialists have tried to help them, without success. They communicate only through gestures and expressions. It's a challenging environment," Clara nodded slowly. I understand, and I believe I can contribute positively, even in the face of these challenges. After a few more technical questions about previous experiences and availability, Margaret decided she would present Clara as a viable candidate to Mr. Harrison, along with the other two more experienced women. The final decision, of course, would be his. To her surprise, after reviewing the resumes and listening to her brief account of the interviews, William asked to meet only Clara in person. Something tells me we need someone different in this house, he explained, when Margaret asked if he wouldn't like to interview the other candidates as well. Someone who brings a new energy. 3 days later, Clara Evans moved into the staff quarters in the service area of the mansion, ready to take on her duties as the new housekeeper for the Harrisons. William had established clear rules: efficiency in managing the house, absolute discretion about the family, and special attention to the twins' needs, though without interfering in their established routine of treatments and appointments. What no one could have predicted was how much the arrival of that simple woman would transform the lives of everyone in that mansion, starting the very next day, her first official day of work. The night before starting her duties, Clara lay awake in her new room, staring at the high ceiling. It was a simple room compared to the rest of the house, yet far more luxurious than any place she had ever lived. The mattress was too soft for someone used to the firmness of a simple bed, and the mansion's silence was broken only by the occasional hum of the central air conditioning system. She thought about the life she had left behind in Asheville, in the mountains of North Carolina. The small house she had shared with Michael, her husband, planning for the arrival of the daughter they had decided to name Hope in the 2nd month of pregnancy. She thought about the medical bills that still needed to be paid, the small grave where the two loves she had lost in a single tragic day lay. A new beginning, she whispered to herself, feeling a single tear slide down her face. One day at a time. She would sleep for only a few hours before beginning her new life in the Harrison mansion, never imagining that fate had already laid out a surprising path for her in that place of deep silences and broken hearts. The sun had barely risen when Clara got up for her first day of work. She put on the uniform provided by the house, a discreet navy blue ensemble, and tied her brown hair into a simple bun. She glanced briefly in the mirror, noticing the stubborn dark circles that refused to disappear even after 2 years of mourning. She took a deep breath and went out to face the challenge that awaited her. The mansion was slowly waking up. A few staff members were already moving through the corridors, the gardener adjusting the automatic irrigation system, the cook preparing breakfast, 2 maids tidying the living room. They all greeted her with formal respect, clearly already informed about the new housekeeper. "Good morning," Clara greeted, approaching the cook, a middle-aged black woman named Brenda. "Could you guide me on the house routine? I know I'm supposed to report to Ms. Margaret, but she only arrives at 8. Brenda smiled, revealing a warm grin that contrasted with the formality of the environment. "Of course, dear. The boss has already left for the gym, as he does every morning. The little ones wake up around 7. The nanny, Mrs. Gable, handles their bath and breakfast. Mr. Harrison usually has breakfast with his daughters at 7:30, before heading to his office." While Brenda explained the details of the family routine, Clara absorbed every piece of information attentively. She learned that the twins had therapy sessions 3 times a week, that William rarely dined at home except on weekends, and that every Friday the boss's mother-in-law, Mrs. Catherine Beaumont, came for lunch. "Does Mr. Harrison's mother-in-law still visit the house often?" Clara asked, curious. "Mrs. Beaumont practically ran everything here after Mrs. Eleanor left us," Brenda explained, lowering her voice. "But a few months ago the boss asked her to step back. You know how these controlling madams are. Still, she comes every week to see her granddaughters and inspect everything as if she still owned the place." Clara nodded, understanding the complex family dynamics she was entering. She continued her tour of the mansion, familiarizing herself with each room, each corridor, each small detail of the property she would now be responsible for managing. Around 7 o'clock, she was in the spacious main living room when she heard light footsteps descending the marble staircase. Turning, she saw the twins holding hands with Mrs. Gable. Charlotte and Amelia wore identical pastel-colored dresses, distinguished only by the colored clips in their hair. Their angelic faces were marked by a seriousness unusual for such young children, and their eyes, identical and deeply green, carried a sadness that tugged at Clara's heart. "Good morning," she greeted, crouching down to their level. "My name is Clara. I'll be working in your house from today on." The twins observed her with intense curiosity, but remained silent. Mrs. Gable smiled gently at the new employee. "They're a bit shy with new people," the nanny explained. "Girls, this is Mrs. Clara, the new housekeeper. She's going to take care of our house now that Mrs. Davies is gone." Clara didn't expect a response, having been informed of the children's mutism. Still, she addressed them directly, with the naturalness of someone talking to any child. "You have a very beautiful house. Did you know I come from a small town where the houses are much smaller? Back in Asheville, we could see mountains from the window. It's different here in Los Angeles, isn't it? So many tall buildings." To Mrs. Gable's surprise, the twins didn't look away as they usually did when adults tried to engage them in conversation. On the contrary, they seemed to absorb Clara's every word with genuine interest. "Shall we go to the breakfast room? Your father should be arriving soon," Mrs. Gable suggested, still holding the girls' hands. As the children walked away, Clara noticed Amelia looking back, as if she wanted to continue observing the new employee. After breakfast, which William ate hastily before leaving for an important meeting, Clara began her tasks. She checked the pantry stock, organized the work schedule for the other staff, and made a list of necessary purchases. Around 10 o'clock, she was in the spacious living room vacuuming the luxurious Persian rug when she sensed a presence. Turning, she saw the twins standing at the entrance of the room, watching her in silence. "Hello again," she smiled, turning off the vacuum cleaner. "No school today?" Mrs. Gable appeared right behind the girls, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Clara. The girls weren't very cooperative with the private tutor today. Miss Mariana ended up finishing the lesson early." "I understand," Clara replied, showing no judgment. She turned to the twins. "Do you want to help me? I can show you how to clean a rug as beautiful as this one." To Mrs. Gable's astonishment, Charlotte took a step forward, as if accepting the invitation. Clara smiled and handed the girl a small feather duster. "See that little corner near the sofa? Dust bunnies love to hide there." While Charlotte timidly made her way to the indicated spot, Amelia remained watching, still holding Mrs. Gable's hand. Clara continued her work, casually commenting on what she was doing, as if she were in a normal conversation with the children, even without receiving verbal responses. "In my town, there was a square with a bandstand. Do you know what a bandstand is? It's like a round little stage where bands would play on Sundays. I loved going there with my husband to listen to music." "Do you like music?" Amelia let go of Mrs. Gable's hand and slowly approached, pointing to the grand piano in the corner of the room. "Oh, you like the piano? It's a beautiful instrument, isn't it?" Clara smiled, following the girl to the instrument. "Did your mother play for you?" The question slipped out before she could contain it, and Clara feared she had made a mistake by mentioning their deceased mother. To her surprise, Amelia nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but definitely affirmative. Mrs. Gable seemed dumbfounded. They don't usually react to questions about Mrs. Eleanor," she whispered. Clara decided to follow her intuition. Without making a fuss about the small interaction, she sat at the piano and played a few simple notes. She wasn't a pianist, but she could reproduce basic melodies she had learned in her childhood music lessons. "Do you know this song?" she asked, playing the first chords of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. She began to hum softly, her melodious voice filling the previously silent room. To Mrs. Gable's complete astonishment, the twins drew closer, Charlotte abandoning her duster to stand beside her sister. Their green eyes were fixed on Clara's fingers, which danced clumsily over the keys. "Do you know what my mother always used to tell me?" Clara continued, alternating between notes. "That when we're sad, we can save our voice to conserve energy. But there comes a time when we need to sing again, because music helps to heal sadness." As she played, Clara began to sing a lullaby she had created for the daughter she never got to meet. It was a simple melody, with lyrics about a little star that protected children's dreams. Her voice, though not professional, was sweet and filled with genuine emotion. The twins sat on the bench beside her, one on each side, their small bodies leaning closer to Clara. Mrs. Gable watched the seen with teary eyes, hardly believing what she was seeing. In 3 years, she had never witnessed the girls approach a stranger so spontaneously. When the song ended, Clara smiled at the children. "Did you like it? It was a song I wrote for my little girl, but she became a little star before she could hear it." Charlotte, who had always been considered the more introverted of the two, reached out her tiny hand and touched Clara's, a gesture of comfort so pure and sincere that the woman felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you," Clara whispered, moved by that small gesture. The moment was interrupted by Margaret, who entered the room looking for Clara to discuss administrative matters. The twins immediately returned to their reserved posture, moving away from the piano. "I'm sorry, Miss Margaret," Clara hurried to say, standing up. "I was just taking a break." "Don't worry," Margaret replied, curiously observing the unusual scene. "I just came to let you know that Mr. Harrison called. He's bringing a guest for dinner tonight, an important investor. We need to arrange everything." As Clara followed Margaret to discuss the dinner preparations, she glanced back and saw the twins still standing near the piano, watching her with eyes that now seemed a little more alive. The rest of the day was spent preparing for the important dinner. Clara coordinated the team with surprising efficiency for someone on her first day, demonstrating a natural leadership ability that impressed even the ever-demanding Margaret. Around 5 in the afternoon, while supervising the setting of the dining table, Clara noticed Charlotte standing in the doorway of the room holding a book. "Hi, a little one," Clara smiled, approaching her. "What book is that?" Charlotte held out the volume to Clara, a richly illustrated copy of fairy tales. The cover showed an image of Beauty and the Beast dancing in the enchanted ballroom. "Do you like this story?" Clara asked, crouching to be at the girl's level. "It's one of my favorites, too." Without much thought, and momentarily ignoring the pile of tasks she still had to supervise, Clara sat on the hallway floor and opened the book. "Let's see. Once upon a time, in a faraway village, lived a merchant with his daughter named Belle. Soon Amelia joined them, sitting silently on Clara's other side. The housekeeper continued the narrative, giving different voices to each character and making dramatic gestures that drew small smiles, the first in a long time, from the twins' angelic faces. When she reached the part where the beast transforms into the prince, because Belle managed to love him despite his frightening appearance, Clara noticed that the girls had moved closer, each resting her head on one of her arms. There was something in that story about seeing beyond appearances, about the transformative power of love. That seemed to resonate deeply with the children. And then, Clara continued, turning the page, the beast was no longer a beast, but a prince who had been enchanted. Only true love could break the spell, and Belle had proven that her heart saw beyond what the eyes could see. It was at that moment that it happened. A soft sound, almost imperceptible, escaped Charlotte's lips, a whisper, a murmur that gradually took shape into a word. "Mommy." Clara froze, unsure if she had imagined it. But then Amelia, with tears shining in her green eyes, repeated it louder, her voice hoarse from not being used for so long. "Mommy, you're back." The book slipped from Clara's hands and she remained paralyzed, not knowing how to react. The twins were now hugging her tightly, as if afraid she might disappear at any moment. I'm not," Clara stammered, her heart racing. At that exact moment, the sound of something falling came from the other end of the hallway. William was standing there, his cell phone now on the floor, his face as pale as if he had seen a ghost. "Did they speak?" he asked, his voice barely audible, trembling with emotion. Clara nodded, still embraced by the girls. "Yes, sir. They spoke." William approached slowly, as if afraid to break the spell of that moment. He knelt before his daughters, his eyes welling with tears. "Charlotte? Amelia?" he called, his voice choked. Can you say something to Daddy?" The girls looked at him, then at Clara as if seeking permission or guidance. Clara smiled encouragingly, though her own heart was in turmoil. "Daddy," Amelia said finally, reaching out her small hand to touch her father's face. "Mummy's back." William let the tears flow freely. He didn't know what to say, how to explain to his daughters that this was not Eleanor but someone else. However, at that moment, all that mattered was that his daughters had broken their 3-year silence. "Yes, my love," he replied, hugging them both. "Something very special happened today." Clara watched the scene, torn between the joy of witnessing that family reconnection and the discomfort of the girl's confusion. She would do her best to help clarify the situation, but right then, the miracle of the first words after so long was what truly mattered. What none of them could have predicted was how that moment would completely transform their lives, creating bonds that would transcend the circumstances of their meeting and redefine the meaning of family for them all. The news that the Harrison twins had started speaking again spread through the mansion like wildfire. The staff whispered in the hallways, torn between astonishment and joy. Mrs. Gable cried in her room, thanking all the saints for this miracle. Margaret, always so composed, had to sit down when William told her, touching her chest as if to check if her heart was still beating. The dinner with the investor was cancelled. That night, William wouldn't be able to focus on business. He called personally to apologize, inventing a family emergency, which he thought wasn't far from the truth. It was an emergency, yes, but a good kind, the kind that turns your life upside down in the best possible way. The twins didn't leave Clara's side for a single second. They followed her around the house like little shadows, occasionally uttering single words, testing their long dormant voices. With each new word, William felt his eyes well up. "Sir, I think we need to talk about their confusion," Clara said in a low voice, when she finally got a moment alone with her boss, while the girls were having dinner with Mrs. Gable. William ran his hands over his face, the emotional exhaustion of the day finally hitting him. I know. We need to explain that you're not their mother. But how do we do that without causing a new trauma? Without silencing them again?" Clara bit her lip, thoughtful. Maybe we can start by making it clear that my name is Clara, not Eleanor. And gradually help them understand that while I'm not their biological mother, I can be someone who cares about them very much." "That could work," William agreed, looking at Clara with a renewed gaze. Who was this woman who in just one day had accomplished what dozens of specialists couldn't in 3 years? "How did you do it? How did you get them to speak?" Clara shook her head, as surprised as he was. "I'm not sure. Maybe because I didn't try. I just talked to them naturally, told them stories, shared a little of myself. And that story about Beauty and the Beast, about seeing beyond appearances, it seems to have touched something in them." "Or maybe it was you who touched something in them," William replied, with an intensity in his gaze that made Clara look away, suddenly aware of the fine line between employee and employer. In the following weeks, the transformation in the Harrison mansion was nothing short of extraordinary. The twins, once silent as little ghosts, now filled the corridors with laughter and lively chatter. They talked non-stop, as if trying to make up for 3 years of silence, sometimes tripping over their words in their excitement. William cancelled all appointments with specialists and therapists. "Let's give it some time," he explained to Margaret. "Let them just be kids for a while." He started working more from home, setting up a makeshift office in a second-floor guest room, from where he could hear his daughter's voices echoing through the house. Clara continued to perform her role as housekeeper, managing the house with surprising efficiency for someone so new to the position. But everyone knew her role went far beyond supervising staff and organizing meals. She had become the gravitational center of that fragmented family, the bridge that reconnected father and daughters, the catalyst for a healing no one else believed was possible. As for the girls' confusion, Clara and William opted for a gradual approach. Clara gently corrected the twins whenever they called her Mommy, saying softly, "My name is Clara, remember?" William showed his daughters photographs of Eleanor, explaining that she was their mother, who had become a star in the sky, a euphemism suggested by Clara to explain her passing. Slowly the girls began to understand, albeit in their own childish way. "But you're like a mommy too," Charlotte said one afternoon, as Clara braided her hair. "You take care of us just the same." These words warmed Clara's heart but also squeezed it. She knew well the line she shouldn't cross. She was an employee, not a replacement for the mother they had lost. Still, how could she not get attached to these children who had in some way filled the void left by the daughter she never got to hold? On a sunny Sunday afternoon, a month after Clara's arrival, William suggested a picnic in the mansion's gardens. "The girls need some fresh air and sun," he argued. "And so do you, Clara. You've been working too hard." Clara initially hesitated, Picnics seemed like family activities, not for the housekeeper. But the twins insisted so much that she ended up giving in. Brenda prepared a basket with sandwiches, fresh fruit, and natural juices, and Clara helped the girls choose a colorful blanket to spread on the perfectly manicured lawn. Sitting under the dappled shade of a huge mango tree, the four of them formed an almost idyllic picture. William, for the first time in years, had shed his suit and tie, opting for a simple polo shirt and jeans. He looked younger, lighter, as he chased his daughters in an impromptu game of tag. Clara watched the scene, sitting on the blanket, a restrained smile on her lips. There was something so pure, so genuine in that newfound happiness that it almost hurt to witness. "What are you thinking about?" William asked, dropping down beside her on the blanket, breathless after running with the girls, who were now chasing butterflies a few yards away. "About how life comes full circle," Clara answered honestly. 2 months ago I was in Asheville, working 2 different jobs to pay off hospital debts, sleeping only 4 hours a night, and waking up every day wondering if it was worth continuing. She stopped herself, aware she was revealing more than she should. But William didn't seem bothered by this glimpse into her personal life. On the contrary, his eyes conveyed a genuine interest. "And now?" he asked. "Do you still wonder if it's worth it?" Clara watched the twins, who had now sat down on the grass and were making crowns of wildflowers, their little faces concentrated on the task, their lips moving in animated conversation with each other. "Now I know it's worth it," she replied simply. William followed her gaze, watching his daughters. "You know, for 3 years I offered $1 million rewards to any doctor or therapist who could get them to speak again. We consulted specialists from all over the world. We tried everything, conventional therapies, alternative therapies, experimental ones. Nothing worked." He turned to Clara, his dark eyes meeting hers. "And then you arrive, with no specific training, no elaborate techniques, just being yourself. And the miracle happens." Clara felt her face flush under her boss's intense gaze. "I think sometimes it's just like that. Things happen when we least expect them, through the hands of those we least imagine." "They were silent because they were grieving," William continued thoughtfully. "And you understood them because you were grieving too. You recognized each other in the pain." The observation was so accurate that Clara felt a lump in her throat. "Maybe," she agreed, her voice slightly choked. "I know the silence that comes after loss well. It's as if words lose their meaning, as if nothing you could say is important enough to break that bubble of pain." William reached out, lightly touching Clara's hand, a gesture that would have been completely inappropriate in any other context, but at that moment felt natural, necessary. "Thank you," he said with a simplicity that carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid words, "for bringing them back." Clara wanted to pull her hand away, knew she should, but couldn't. There was something magnetic in that touch, in that connection that transcended the employer-employee relationship and touched on something deeper, more human, the mutual recognition of 2 people who had walked through the dark valley of loss and somehow found light on the other side. "Dad, Clara, look what we made," exclaimed Amelia, running towards them with a flower crown in her hands. Charlotte followed, carrying another one. The moment between the adults dissolved, but something had changed. A seed had been planted, a possibility silently acknowledged. They both knew, without needing to say it, that this impromptu picnic had subtly altered the course of their lives. The twins placed the crowns on the adults' heads, laughing at the sight of their father, always so serious and formal, adorned with wildflowers. "Now you look like a king," declared Charlotte, looking at her father. "And Clara looks like a queen," Amelia added, with the impeccable logic of a 5-year-old. William and Clara exchanged a quick glance, both aware of the dangerous innocence of that childish observation. "How about we play some ball?" William suggested, breaking the moment. "I saw one in the toy closet that's never been used." The following weeks brought an almost domestic routine to the mansion that once resembled a mausoleum. Mornings began with the family gathered for breakfast, the twins chattering about their dreams, William listening attentively, Clara supervising the meal, but inevitably being drawn into the conversation. During the day, while William worked and the girls studied with a newly hired tutor, Clara performed her duties as housekeeper. But in the evenings, as if by a tacit agreement, the 4 of them always found time to be together. A board game, a storytelling session, a walk through the gardens. Margaret observed this transformation with a mix of relief and concern. On one hand, it was undeniable that the house was alive again, that William seemed to be finally emerging from the depression that had consumed him for 3 years, that the girls were flourishing every day. On the other hand, the secretary couldn't help but notice the increasingly less discreet glances the boss cast at the housekeeper. The way his face lit up when Clara entered the room, how he invented excuses to be in the same spaces as her. "Mr. Harrison," she ventured one afternoon, when they were alone in the office reviewing documents, "I apologize for the intrusion, but as someone who has known you for so many years and cares for your well-being, I've noticed certain changes in your dynamic with Mrs. Evans." William looked up from the papers, one eyebrow raised. "Changes? I don't understand, Margaret." The secretary took a deep breath, mustering her courage. "You've been closer to her than would be usual in a professional relationship." A brief silence followed the observation. William leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the mahogany desk. "Clara gave my daughters their lives back," he finally replied. "It's natural that I feel gratitude, that I want to include her more in our daily life." "Gratitude," Margaret repeated cautiously. "Is that all it is, sir? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like something more complex." William frowned, a flash of irritation crossing his normally controlled features. "Even if it were, Margaret, would that be a problem?" "Not for me, certainly," she hurried to clarify. "But you need to consider the implications. Your mother-in-law, for example. Mrs. Beaumont has always been very protective of her daughter's memory. And the twins, who already confused Clara with their mother once." "I understand your concern," William interrupted, his tone now softer. "And I appreciate your frankness. But I can assure you that everything I've done, everything we've done, is solely for the well-being of my daughters." Margaret nodded, recognizing the indirect cue to drop the subject. But before she could return to the documents, the office intercom buzzed. It was the front desk, announcing the unexpected arrival of Mrs. Catherine Beaumont. William frowned. His mother-in-law usually only visited on Fridays, and it was only Wednesday. "Please show her to the main living room. I'll be there in a minute." As he went to meet his mother-in-law, William felt an inexplicable unease. Catherine Beaumont, at 60, was the matriarch of one of the most traditional and influential families in Los Angeles. A widow for over a decade, she dedicated herself entirely to preserving her husband's legacy through a cultural foundation that bore his name. Since Eleanor's tragic passing, she had also taken on the mission of ensuring that her daughter's memory was kept alive in the Harrison mansion, which, in practice, meant resisting any change in the family dynamic. He found her sitting upright on one of the living room sofas, dressed impeccably in a navy blue silk suit, her grey hair perfectly coiffed in an elegant bun. Her aristocratic profile, so similar to her late daughter's, always caused William a mix of comfort and pain. "Catherine," he greeted, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "What a pleasant surprise, and William," she replied with a restrained smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," he assured her, sitting on the sofa opposite her. "The girls are with their tutor now. They'll be thrilled to see you." "Yes, the girls," Catherine said, her tone subtly changing. "In fact, it's about them that I've come to talk." William felt his unease grow. "Did something happen?" "You could tell me," his mother-in-law retorted, her piercing eyes fixed on him. "I received a very strange call from Mrs. Gable last night. Something about the girls speaking again." "What is this, William? Why wasn't I immediately informed of such a significant change in my granddaughter's condition?" William took a deep breath, trying to contain his growing irritation. Why had Mrs. Gable called Catherine before speaking to him? "Yes, it's true. Charlotte and Amelia have been speaking for a few weeks now. It was a gradual transformation, and I wanted to be sure it was sustainable before raising expectations." "A few weeks?" Catherine repeated, indignation evident in her voice. "And I, their grandmother, am only finding out now by chance? Who is responsible for this miracle that not even the best specialists could achieve? A new doctor? Some experimental therapy?" William hesitated for a moment, anticipating his mother-in-law's reaction. "Actually, it was our new housekeeper, Clara." "Evans? Housekeeper?" Catherine almost choked on the word. "Are you telling me that a domestic servant did what entire medical teams couldn't? How is that possible, William?" Before he could answer, excited children's voices echoed down the hall. "Grandma, Grandma Catherine, the twins exclaimed in unison, running to hug their grandmother. Catherine was momentarily paralyzed, her eyes wide at the sound she hadn't heard in 3 years, her granddaughter's voices. For an instant all her indignation dissolved, replaced by a raw, almost painful emotion. "My darlings," she whispered, hugging the girls tightly. You're speaking. It's a miracle." "It's not a miracle, Grandma," Charlotte corrected, with the typical frankness of children. "It was Clara who helped us remember how to talk." "Clara," Catherine repeated, casting an inquisitive glance at William. "Our new housekeeper," Amelia explained cheerfully. "She tells us stories, sings songs, and has picnics with us and Daddy." William saw the exact moment his mother-in-law's expression hardened again, a suspicion beginning to form in her eyes. "Picnics with you and your father?" "Yes," Charlotte confirmed, oblivious to the growing tension. "Last Sunday we made flower crowns and put them on her head and Daddy's head. They looked like a king and a queen." William closed his eyes briefly, bracing for the storm. When he opened them, he met Catherine's icy gaze fixed on him, a silent accusation that needed no words. "Girls," he intervened gently, "why don't you go show Grandma that new drawing you made yesterday? It's in your room, remember?" As soon as the twins skipped out, Catherine turned to her son-in-law, her face a mask of restrained indignation. "What exactly is going on in this house, William?" At that exact moment, Clara entered the room carrying a tray with tea and cookies. She stopped short upon noticing the visitor, immediately sensing the charged atmosphere. "Excuse me," she said, starting to retreat. "I didn't know you had company." "No, stay," Catherine ordered, rising from the sofa with the feline grace of a predator. "You must be Clara, the miracle-working housekeeper." William also stood up, instinctively moving closer to Clara, as if to protect her. "Catherine, this is Clara Evans. Clara, Mrs. Catherine Beaumont, the girl's grandmother." Clara gave a respectful nod, still holding the tray. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mum. The girls speak very highly of you." "I imagine they do," Catherine replied, her tone sharp. "Just as apparently they speak about you. And about family picnics." Clara paled slightly, understanding the insinuation. William stepped forward. "Clara has been a very positive presence for the girls," he said firmly. "Thanks to her, they're speaking again, laughing, behaving like normal children for the first time in years. I think that deserves our respect and gratitude, not suspicion." "Spare me, William," Catherine interrupted, her voice dangerously calm. "I'm not naive. I know this scenario well. A wealthy widower alone with 2 small children, and a young, beautiful woman who shows up to heal the family." She turned to Clara, her gaze appraising her from head to toe. "I must congratulate you on your strategy. It was quite effective." "Ma'am, I didn't," Clara began, but William cut her off. "That's enough, Catherine. I will not allow you to speak to Clara like that. Whatever you're implying, you're completely mistaken." Catherine let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Am I the one who's mistaken, or are you the one who's blind? Or perhaps—" Her words were cut short by the return of the twins, proudly carrying a large, colorful piece of paper. "Grandma, look what we drew!" exclaimed Amelia, holding out the drawing. Catherine forced a smile for her granddaughters, but her eyes remained cold as they landed on Clara again. "We'll continue this conversation another time," she said softly, for only the adults to hear. Clara finally placed the tray on the coffee table, her hands trembling slightly. "Excuse me," she murmured, quickly leaving the room. William watched her go, a sense of emptiness settling in his chest. Something had just changed. An invisible line had been crossed, and he knew instinctively that nothing would ever be the same again. After Catherine's unexpected visit, a palpable tension settled over the Harrison mansion. William became more reserved, Clara more cautious, and even the twins seemed to sense the change in atmosphere, clinging even more tightly to the housekeeper, as if they sensed she might disappear at any moment. The picnics in the garden ceased. The storytelling sessions, once a family moment, now only happened when William wasn't home. Clara had reverted to acting strictly as an employee, maintaining the professional distance that should never have been breached. On a particularly hot afternoon, while supervising the pool cleaning, Clara felt someone's presence behind her. Turning, she found William standing a few feet away, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Can we talk?" he asked, gesturing towards the wooden benches in the shade of the trees. Clara nodded, following him to the more secluded part of the garden, away from the prying ears of other staff members. They sat side by side, an uncomfortable silence hanging between them. "The girls miss you," William finally said, staring at the horizon instead of looking at her directly. "They ask why you don't tell stories to the three of us together anymore." Clara nervously smoothed the hem of her uniform. "I thought it was more appropriate to maintain a more professional relationship after what happened with Mrs. Beaumont." William let out a tired sigh. "Catherine has strong opinions about how this family should function. Since Eleanor left us, she sees herself as the guardian of her daughter's memory, the protector of her granddaughters. Her heart is in the right place, but her methods—" He shook his head. "She has no right to make the insinuations she made." "But she's not completely wrong, is she?" Clara asked softly, finally finding the courage to look him in the eye. "Something changed between us, William. Something that shouldn't have." The use of his first name without the formal Mr. Harrison was evidence of the very change she mentioned. William held her gaze, and for a moment neither of them breathed. What exactly shouldn't have changed, Clara? The fact that for the first time in 3 years, this house has become a home again? That my daughters are talking, laughing, living like normal children? That I— He paused, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. That I finally managed to see beyond my own pain. Clara felt a lump in her throat. "I'm happy about all of that, truly. But my role here is to be the housekeeper, not—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Not what?" William pressed, leaning slightly closer. "Not a friend? Not someone who cares about this family? Not someone you could develop feelings for beyond gratitude," Clara completed, the words coming out almost in a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. William closed his eyes for a moment, as if seeking internal balance. "And what if it's already too late for that?" he finally asked, his voice a mixture of vulnerability and determination. "What if I'm already feeling something that goes far beyond gratitude?" Clara's heart pounded. She knew she should get up, walk away, end this dangerous conversation, but something kept her pinned to that bench, to that moment, to those eyes that gazed at her as if she were the answer to a question he had carried for years. "William, We can't. Your mother-in-law, the girls, what would everyone think? I'm just an employee." "You were never just anything, Clara," he replied firmly. "From the very first day, you were much more than a housekeeper to this house. You brought my daughters back to life. He hesitated, then opted for complete honesty. "You brought me back to life." A noise in the distance made them both turn their heads. Margaret was approaching along the stone path, her expression clearly indicating something urgent. "Mr. Harrison," she called, still a few yards away, giving them time to compose themselves. "Phone call for you." "It's Mr. Thompson about the Vertical Gardens project." William nodded, reluctantly standing up. "Tell him I'll be in the office in a minute." As Margaret walked away, he turned to Clara one last time. "This conversation isn't over," he said with the same determination he applied to his business. "We need to be honest about what we're feeling, Clara. For the first time in a long time, I'm envisioning a different future for my family. A future with you in it." Before Clara could respond, William had already walked away, leaving her alone with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Joy at what she had just heard, fear of the consequences, guilt over the memory of Michael and the baby she never got to meet, and a confusing sense that perhaps fate was offering her a second chance. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, replaying the conversation with William in her mind, imagining all the possible outcomes of this impossible situation. How could a simple woman from rural North Carolina, with a past marked by tragedy and debt, even consider a relationship with one of the wealthiest men in Los Angeles? And the girls who already confused her with their lost mother. Wouldn't it be cruel to fuel that confusion even more? On the other hand, she couldn't deny the feelings growing inside her. William wasn't just her boss, a rich and powerful man. He was a dedicated father who had faced his own tragedy with dignity, who loved his daughters, above all else, who looked at her as if he truly saw her, not just her physical appearance, but her essence. By the time the sun began to rise, Clara had made a decision. She had to keep her distance. As painful as it was, she couldn't allow these feelings to blossom. There was too much at stake: her reputation, the children's well-being, even the Harrison empire. which would surely be affected by a scandal involving the millionaire widower and the housekeeper. With this firm resolution in mind, she faced the new day. She put on her uniform, tied her hair back, and went down to coordinate the family breakfast as she always did. She tried to maintain a neutral expression when she met William in the dining room, responding formally when he greeted her. The twins, however, were harder to fool. "Clara, are you sad?" asked Amelia, watching her attentively as she set the table. "No, dear, just a little tired," Clara replied, forcing a smile. "When I'm sad, Daddy hugs me," Charlotte informed her seriously. "It works really well." William, who was listening to the conversation while pouring himself coffee, looked up at Clara, a half smile on his lips. "My daughter is right. Her hugs are miraculous." The exchange of glances between the adults did not go unnoticed by Mrs. Gable, who was watching discreetly from the other side of the room. The nanny, in her late 50s, and with wisdom gained from a life of serving wealthy families, recognized the signs. There was tension in the air, electricity, the kind of energy that precedes great changes or great storms. The day passed without incident, with Clara deliberately keeping busy in areas of the mansion where William did not usually go. Her plan of avoidance, however, was short-lived. Around 4 in the afternoon, Margaret came looking for her. "Mr. Harrison would like to see you in his office." "Mrs. Evans," the secretary informed her, her neutral tone revealing nothing about the nature of the summons. With a racing heart, Clara made her way to William's third-floor office. She knocked softly on the door, and upon hearing the invitation to enter, took a deep breath before opening it. The elegant room, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and panoramic city view, always impressed her. William was standing by the window, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. He turned as she entered, and Clara immediately noticed his expression was different. There was none of the usual professional mask of controlled efficiency, but rather an almost tangible vulnerability. "Thank you for coming," he said, indicating one of the leather armchairs. "Please have a seat." Clara obeyed, keeping her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide her nervousness. "I know our conversation yesterday left a lot of things up in the air," William began, sitting in the armchair opposite her, rather than taking his usual position behind the imposing desk. "And I noticed you've been avoiding me today. Mr. Harrison, He raised a hand, gently interrupting her. "Please, let me finish. I spent the night thinking about everything that's happened since you came to this house. The transformation of my daughters, the change in the atmosphere of this mansion, the change in me." William leaned forward, closing the distance between them. "For 3 years I lived like a ghost in my own life, conducting business, making decisions, but not really feeling, not really living. The loss of Eleanor paralyzed me in a way I can't explain. And then you arrived and—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It's not just gratitude I feel, Clara, it's much more. It's as if you've rekindled a flame I thought was extinguished forever." Clara felt tears welling up, but fought to hold them back. "William, I understand what you're saying, and I'd be dishonest if I denied that I also feel something special. But you have to consider the implications. Your mother-in-law has already made it clear what she thinks of me, of my presence here. And the girls who are still so vulnerable." "The girls adore you," William interrupted softly. "They flourish in your presence. And as for Catherine," he sighed, "she'll have to accept eventually that life goes on. That this doesn't mean dishonoring Eleanor's memory." "It's not that simple," Clara insisted. "There are huge social differences between us. You're William Sterling Harrison, owner of a real estate empire. I'm Clara Evans, the widow of a physical education teacher from Asheville, full of debt with no college degree." William shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "Is that what you think matters to me? Titles, money, social status? Not to you, perhaps," Clara replied. "But to the world out there, yes. To your investors, your colleagues, the society you move in. I would be seen as the opportunistic housekeeper who seduced her widower boss." A heavy silence settled between them. William stood up, walking to the window again, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders tense. "Do you know what I learned when Eleanor was gone?" he asked without turning around. "That all this wealth, all this power, all these social connections, none of it really matters. I couldn't buy one more minute of her life. I couldn't negotiate with fate. In the end, we're just human, Clara. Fragile, imperfect, trying to find a little happiness while we're here." He turned to face her. I don't know what the future holds for us. I can't promise it will be easy. But I know I don't want to let fear, or the judgment of others, stop me from feeling what I'm feeling." Clara stood up too, her heart beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "And what exactly are you feeling, William?" "I think I'm falling in love with you," he replied simply, the absolute vulnerability of that admission more powerful than any grand declaration. The air seemed to vanish from Clara's lungs. She had imagined many scenarios, prepared many responses, but nothing for the direct honesty of those words. Before she could formulate a reply, the office door opened abruptly. Catherine Beaumont entered, followed by a visibly distressed Margaret. "I'm so sorry." "Mr. Harrison," the secretary hurried to explain. "Mrs. Beaumont insisted it was urgent. I couldn't—" "It's all right, Margaret," William interrupted, his posture immediately shifting to a more formal demeanor. "Could you give us a moment, please?" "And take Mrs. Evans with you." "Mrs. Evans stays," Catherine declared, her tone admitting no argument. "What I have to say directly involves her." Margaret cast an apologetic glance at William and withdrew, closing the door behind her. A tense silence filled the office as Catherine observed the scene before her. William and Clara, clearly in the middle of an intimate conversation, standing just a few feet from each other. "It seems I've interrupted something important," she commented with false casualness. "I hope it wasn't inappropriate." "What do you want, Catherine?" William asked, not hiding his irritation. "I have a full schedule today." "Yes, I see," she replied sarcastically, casting a meaningful look at Clara. "So busy you barely have time to answer my calls these past few days. I had to come in person to discuss a matter of extreme importance regarding the girls." "What matter?" William asked, his voice softening at the mention of his daughters. Catherine sat elegantly in one of the armchairs, as if taking control of the situation. "The openings at St. Monica's Academy. Do you remember? The application deadline is this week, and you still haven't sent the necessary paperwork." William frowned, clearly confused by the supposed urgency of the matter. "Margaret is handling that. And it wasn't necessary to come all the way here for this." "Oh, but I had other reasons too," Catherine continued, her eyes now fixed on Clara, who remained standing, uncomfortably aware that she was in the middle of a family minefield. "I wanted to get to know the extraordinary Mrs. Evans better, who performed the miracle no specialist could." William stepped forward, subtly positioning himself between Clara and his mother-in-law. "Catherine, if you came here to make insinuations or cause trouble—" "Trouble," she interrupted with a dry laugh. "Am I causing trouble?" "I'm not the one having an affair with the housekeeper, William." Clara felt her face burn. "Ma'am, there is no—" "Spare me," Catherine cut in without even looking at her. "I wasn't born yesterday. The staff talks, the girls talk. Daddy and Clara had a picnic. Daddy smiles when Clara is around. Daddy and Clara look like a king and a queen. It doesn't take a genius to put the pieces together." William took a deep breath, visibly controlling his irritation. "I will not have you speak like this in my house, Catherine. It's none of your business how I manage my personal life." "It becomes my business when it involves my granddaughters," she retorted, her voice rising. "When it involves my daughter's memory being dishonored by a gold digger." "Enough!" William exclaimed, slamming his hand on the desk hard enough to make the objects jump. "I will not tolerate you insulting Clara in this way. She is not a gold digger. She is a woman of integrity who has transformed our lives for the better." Catherine raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Integrity?" "We'll see about that." Turning finally to Clara, she asked, "What was your late husband's name again, Mrs. Evans?" Clara blinked, surprised by the abrupt change of subject. Michael Evans." "Michael Evans," Catherine repeated slowly, as if savoring the name. "A physical education teacher in Asheville, wasn't he? Died 2 years ago in a car accident, along with your unborn daughter." Clara's blood ran cold. How did Catherine know so many details? "Yes, ma'am." A cold, calculated smile appeared on the matriarch's lips. "And the medical and funeral debts you're still paying off? The 3 jobs you had to hold down to survive. The decision to move to Los Angeles for a new beginning. All true as well?" Clara nodded silently, a lump forming in her throat. William looked from one to the other, confused by the turn of the conversation. "What are you getting at, Catherine?" he asked. His mother-in-law opened the elegant handbag she was carrying and took out an envelope, handing it to William. "Open it," she commanded. Reluctantly, William obeyed. Inside was a detailed report, apparently from a private investigation agency, with photos, dates, documents. His eyes scanned the contents quickly, widening as he absorbed the information. "You had her investigated?" he asked incredulously, looking up at Catherine. "Without my knowledge or consent?" "Of course I did," she replied without remorse. "Someone had to protect you and the girls from this farce." "Farce?" William repeated, looking again at the report, then at Clara, who had turned pale. "What are you talking about?" "The report just confirms what Clara told us. Her husband, the accident, the debts." "Read page 4 more carefully," Catherine instructed, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "The part about the medical procedures Mrs. Evans underwent after the accident." William turned the page, his eyes scanning the text. Clara felt her legs give way, leaning on a nearby chair. She knew exactly what he was reading. The truth she had chosen not to share, not out of dishonesty, but because it was too painful to put into words. "Is it true?" William finally asked, his voice almost a whisper. You can't have children. Ever again." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage. When she opened them again, there was determination in her gaze, despite the tears threatening to fall. "Yes," she replied simply. "The accident caused irreparable damage. The doctors were clear about that." Catherine smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Do you see now, William? This woman not only seduced you for your money and status, but she also hid a crucial fact. She can never give you the son you've always wanted. The heir that Eleanor didn't have time to conceive." William stared at his mother-in-law, disbelief and fury mixing in his gaze. "Is that it? Is that why you had her investigated? To find out if she can have children or not? As if that defines her worth as a person." "Don't be naive, William," Catherine retorted. "You are the last male in the Harrison line. You need a male heir to continue your family's legacy, your father's legacy. Eleanor understood that from the beginning, though fate didn't give her enough time. This woman," she pointed at Clara with disdain, "cannot offer you that, even if her intentions were pure, which I seriously doubt." Clara stood up, finally finding her voice. "You are right about one thing, Mrs. Beaumont. I cannot have children. The accident that took Michael and our unborn daughter also took that possibility from me forever. It's a pain I carry every day, much greater than the physical scars." She took a deep breath, looking the matriarch in the eye. "But you are deeply mistaken about my intentions. I never planned to get emotionally involved with Mr. Harrison. I never sought anything other than to do my job with dignity and help those children who, in some inexplicable way, connected with me." Turning to William, she continued, her voice now softer. "I'm sorry I didn't share this information sooner. It's not something I talk about easily. But Mrs. Beaumont is right in one respect. You deserve someone who can carry on your lineage, who can be a complete mother to your daughters." And then, lifting her chin in a final gesture of dignity, she concluded, "Therefore, Mr. Harrison, I formally submit my resignation, effective immediately. I will pack my things and leave today." Without waiting for a response, Clara headed for the door, her legs trembling but her posture erect. William, momentarily paralyzed by shock, watched her leave before reacting. "Clara, wait," he called, moving to follow her. But Catherine stood in his way. "Let her go, William," she said firmly. "It's for the best, especially for the girls." William faced his mother-in-law, years of respect and consideration dissolving in a moment of absolute clarity. "You have no idea what's best for my daughters, Catherine. If you did, you would never have interfered in such a cruel way. You would never have subjected Clara to this humiliation." "I did what was necessary," she replied, impassive. "One day you'll thank me." "Don't count on it," he retorted coldly, before pushing past her and hurrying out of the office, determined to reach Clara before it was too late. He found her in the main hallway, already on her way to her room, walking quickly despite the tears now streaming freely down her face. "Clara, please," he called, quickening his pace to catch up with her. "Don't go like this." She stopped but didn't turn around immediately. When she finally did, her face was tear-streaked, but there was a resolution in her eyes that William had never seen before. "There's nothing more to say, William. Your mother-in-law is right. I don't belong in this world. I can't offer what you and your family need." "And what do I need, Clara?" he asked, moving closer. "Because right now the only thing I know for sure is that I need you in my life." "And my daughter's lives." Clara shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "You think that now. But eventually, you'll realize there are many reasons why it would never work. The social difference, my inability to have children, society's judgment. Is that you talking or Catherine's voice in your head?" William interrupted, gently touching her face. "Because the Clara I know, the woman who brought life back to my family, would never let herself be defeated by obstacles like these." Before she could answer, children's voices echoed down the hall. "Daddy, Clara, where are you?" The twins appeared, running excitedly, carrying freshly made drawings, but they stopped short when they saw the scene before them. Clara with a tear-streaked face, William with a tormented expression. "What happened?" asked Charlotte, her small face contracting with worry. "Why is Clara crying?" William knelt to his daughter's level, searching for the right words to explain such a complex situation to such young children. "Clara's a little sad, sweetie. Sometimes adults get sad too, just like you do from time to time." "Is it because of Grandma?" asked Amelia, surprising the adults with her perception. She was talking loudly in the office. She sounded angry. William exchanged a look with Clara, who quickly wiped her tears with the back of her hands. Not wanting to alarm the girls further. "Everything's okay. Little ones," she assured them, forcing a smile. "Adults have disagreements sometimes. It's nothing serious." "Are you leaving?" Charlotte asked directly, her green eyes, so much like her mother's, fixed on Clara with a disconcerting intensity. Clara began, but her voice failed. "No," William answered firmly, standing up again. "Clara isn't going anywhere. Right, Clara?" His eyes met hers, silently communicating much more than words could express. A plea, a promise, a declaration of intent. "We need to talk more," Clara said softly, for only William to hear. "There are many things to consider." "I agree," he replied, "but not under the influence of Catherine's manipulations. Not with you already on your way out. Please stay, at least until we can have an honest, calm conversation." Clara looked at the girls, who were staring at her expectantly, and felt her heart soften. How could she abandon them now after everything? How could she just disappear from their lives, potentially causing another trauma? "All right," she finally agreed. "I'll stay. For now." The relief on William's face was evident, as was the joy on the twins, who ran to hug Clara as if they had just averted a major catastrophe. "How about we all go have some ice cream in the garden?" William suggested, an offer of peace, an attempt to return to some form of normality. "Brenda made that chocolate kind you love." The girls accepted enthusiastically, taking Clara's hands and pulling her towards the kitchen, already chattering about which toppings they would choose. As he followed them, William couldn't help but think of the report he was still holding, of the revelations about Clara's past, her physical and emotional scars, of Catherine's calculated cruelty, using that intimate information as a weapon, and of the extraordinary strength of this woman, who, despite everything she had suffered, still had the capacity to love, to care, to bring light into the lives of others. It wouldn't be easy. Catherine wouldn't give up easily. Society would judge. There would be enormous obstacles. But as he watched Clara smiling at his daughters, William knew with a certainty he hadn't felt in a long time that this was just the beginning of a new story for all of them. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Catherine in William's office. 3 days of an apparent normality that hid the impending storm. On the surface, the mansion's routine remained unchanged. The girls continued with their lessons and games, William with his business meetings, Clara with the management of the house. But in the exchanged glances, the prolonged silences, the palpable tension that filled every room, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. Catherine did not return to the mansion in those days, but her presence was felt in the frequent calls to William, the messages sent to Mrs. Gable asking about her granddaughters, and most of all, in the brown envelope that remained in William's desk drawer like a ticking time bomb. On a particularly warm Saturday morning, while the twins played in the pool under Mrs. Gable's supervision, William found Clara in the garden, tending to the orchids that were her latest project. She wore a simple cotton dress. It was her day off, and her hair was down, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She looked younger, lighter, almost like a different person outside of her formal housekeeper's uniform. "They look beautiful under your care," he commented. Approaching her, Clara smiled without looking away from the flowers. "They just need attention and patience, like all living things." William sat on the nearby bench, watching her work. "We need to talk, Clara." "I know," she replied, finally turning to face him. "I've been putting it off, haven't I? Hoping that somehow everything would resolve itself." "It won't resolve itself," William said softly. "We need to decide. What happens now?" Clara sighed, taking off her gardening gloves and sitting next to him on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. "What do you want to happen, William?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities and consequences. William took a moment before answering, as if weighing each word. "I want you to stay," he finally said. "Not just as a housekeeper, but as part of our lives." "My life." Clara looked down, studying her own hands, now bare but still marked by her recent work with the soil. "And what your mother-in-law said, about me not being able to have children, about the social differences between us." "I don't care about any of that," William interrupted, leaning closer. "I have 2 wonderful daughters, whom you helped bring back to life. I don't need a male heir to validate my existence or perpetuate some outdated legacy. It's not that simple, William. Your family, your business, my business will prosper or not based on my competence, not on who shares my bed," he replied firmly. "And as for my family, well, the only opinions that really matter to me are Charlotte's and Amelia's, and they adore you." Clara couldn't suppress a small smile. "They are special. They found a way into my heart that I didn't think was possible again." William observed her profile, the gentle curve of her cheek, the delicate flutter of her eyelashes. "Do you believe in second chances, Clara?" She turned to face him, the question resonating deeply. "I want to believe. After Michael and our daughter, I thought I would never feel anything but pain again. But then came the twins, and you and this house that has somehow become more of a home to me in a few months than any other place in years." "Then give us a chance," William pleaded, taking her hands in his. "We don't have to rush anything. We can go slowly, see where this takes us. But don't give up before we even start." Clara's eyes welled with tears, the vulnerability of the moment almost painful in its intensity. "What if it doesn't work out? What if the girls get even more confused? What if I become just another loss in their lives? And what if it does work out?" William countered. "What if we can build something beautiful, something that heals us all? We can't live in fear of what might happen, Clara. We've already lost too much for that." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, as if seeking inner clarity. When she opened them again, there was a resolution in them that surprised even herself. "You're right. I deserve a second chance. So do you. The girls deserve all the happiness possible." A smile lit up William's face, making him look years younger. "So is that a yes?" "We'll try." Clara nodded, a shy smile on her lips. "We'll try. But we need to be careful, especially with the girls. And maybe it would be better if I found another place to stay, outside the mansion, to avoid complications." William agreed, though reluctantly. "That makes sense. We can find a nearby apartment where you feel comfortable. You could still work here during the day while we decide how to proceed." Before they could continue their conversation, the sound of quick footsteps made them both look up. Margaret was approaching, her usually composed expression now marked by an unusual urgency. "Mr. Harrison, sorry to interrupt," she said, glancing quickly at Clara, "but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention." "What happened?" he asked, standing up. "Mrs. Beaumont is here." "With a lawyer." William frowned, the tension immediately returning to his shoulders. "A lawyer? Why?" "She wouldn't explain, sir. She just said it's extremely urgent and involves the girls." Clara paled, exchanging a worried look with William. "I'll go check on the children," she said, already moving away. "No," William interrupted, gently taking her arm. "I want you to come with me. Whatever Catherine is planning, we'll face it together." Margaret watched the interaction with barely concealed interest, but remained professional. "They're waiting in the main living room, sir." William nodded, offering Clara his arm in a gesture that left no doubt about his position. Reluctantly, but determined not to show weakness, Clara accepted. and together they headed towards the house. In the spacious living room, Catherine waited elegantly seated in an armchair, while a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit stood beside her, a leather briefcase in his hands. The tension in the room was palpable. "Catherine," William greeted coldly, "to what do we owe this surprise visit? And who is your companion?" The matriarch smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "William, dear, this is Mr. Arthur Vance, the family's lawyer for decades. Surely you remember him?" William narrowed his eyes. "Of course. What I don't understand is why he's here." "Please have a seat," Catherine invited, as if she were the hostess and not the visitor. "The matter we have to discuss is delicate." William and Clara remained standing, a silent statement of resistance. "I'd prefer you get straight to the point," William said. "And I sincerely hope it's not what I'm imagining." Catherine sighed dramatically, always so impatient. "Very well." She gestured to the lawyer, who opened his briefcase and took out some documents. "Mr. Harrison," Mr. Vance began in a formal tone, "I am here representing the interests of Mrs. Catherine Beaumont, maternal grandmother of Charlotte and Amelia Harrison. I have been instructed to inform you of a petition for joint custody of the minors." "What?" William exclaimed, disbelief clear in his voice. "Joint custody? Have you lost your mind, Catherine?" The matriarch remained impassive. "It is a perfectly reasonable request, considering the circumstances. As the maternal grandmother, I have legal rights, especially when there is concern for the children's well-being." "Concern for their well-being?" William repeated, his voice dangerously low. "My daughters have never been better than they are now. They're speaking again, playing, behaving like normal children for the first time in years." "Yes, thanks to the influence of Mrs. Evans," Catherine replied, casting a disdainful look at Clara. "An influence which, I must add, is leading to a worrying psychological confusion. The girls called her Mommy, William. Doesn't that strike you as a serious problem?" Clara, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. "With all due respect, ma'am, that happened only once at the beginning. Since then we have been working carefully to help them understand who I am and who their mother was." "Ah, now the maid speaks for you, William?" Catherine asked sarcastically. "This only confirms my concerns. This woman has a disproportionate influence over you and the girls." The lawyer cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable with the turn of the conversation. "Ma'am, perhaps it would be better to stick to the legal aspects of the matter." "Yes, let's get to the legal aspects," William agreed, his anger contained in every syllable. "There is no legal basis for a joint custody request in this case. I am a single father, with full mental and financial capacity to raise my daughters. They attend regular therapy, have constant medical follow-up, and are enrolled in one of the best schools in the country. What exactly is your justification for this madness?" The lawyer consulted his papers. The petition cites concerns regarding the psychological environment in the minor's current home, specifically related to the apparently inappropriate relationship between the father and a household employee, which is allegedly causing emotional confusion in the children, who are still traumatized by the loss of their mother. William was momentarily speechless, the audacity of the accusation taking his breath away. Clara placed a gentle hand on his arm, a gesture of support that did not go unnoticed by Catherine. "You see," the matriarch pointed out, "this is exactly the kind of behavior I'm talking about. A housekeeper should not take such liberties." "Catherine," William finally said, his voice controlled but filled with emotion, "are you really willing to traumatize your granddaughters even more, dragging them into an unnecessary legal battle, just because you don't approve of my personal choices?" "This isn't about my preferences, William. It's about Eleanor's legacy, the girl's well-being, the future of the Harrison family. Do you really think my daughter would approve of seeing her children raised by a cheap substitute?" The deliberate cruelty of those words hit Clara like a physical blow. William, sensing their impact, stepped forward, positioning himself protectively. "Enough," he commanded, his voice now raised. "You have crossed every line, Catherine. I will not allow you to insult Clara in my house before my eyes. If you have legitimate concerns about my daughters, we can discuss them civilly. But this personal attack, this attempt at manipulation using the girls as pawns, it ends now." Catherine stood up, facing her son-in-law without backing down. "You don't see what's happening? This woman has bewitched you somehow. In just a few months, she has completely transformed your life, your priorities. Can you imagine what your business colleagues will say? The press? Millionaire widower marries the maid. It will be a scandal, William. Your reputation, your business, everything will be affected. I don't care, he replied simply. If that's what people choose to focus on, instead of my daughter's happiness, the positive transformation in our lives, then that's their problem, not mine. The lawyer, clearly uncomfortable with the heated family argument, cleared his throat again. Mr. Harrison, regardless of your objections, the fact is that the petition will be filed next week. I suggest you consult your own lawyer to prepare your response. William nodded curtly. You can be sure I will, Mr. Vance, and I suggest you advise your client on the implications of a frivolous lawsuit that is potentially harmful to the very children she claims to want to protect. Clara, who had remained silent, finally spoke, her voice surprisingly firm. Mrs. Beaumont, I understand your concern for your granddaughters. I really do, and believe me, the last thing I want is to cause more trauma or confusion for Charlotte and Amelia. They have suffered enough already. Catherine turned to her, disdain evident in her expression. Spare me your sentimental speeches. I'm not interested in what you think or want. You should be, Clara replied calmly. Because I love those children, Mum. Not as a substitute for their mother. No one could ever replace Eleanor. But as someone who genuinely wants to see them happy and healthy. Something in the sincerity of those words seemed to strike a sensitive chord in Catherine. For a brief moment her expression faltered, a shadow of uncertainty crossing her eyes. But as quickly as it came, it vanished, replaced by her usual mask of coldness. Love, she repeated with contempt. As if love is enough to raise heirs to the Harrison fortune. These children need proper guidance, appropriate social connections, an education that prepares them for the world they belong to. What can you offer them? Fairy tales and lullabies? What she offers them, William intervened, is unconditional acceptance, patience, understanding. Things it's worth noting, Catherine, that you rarely showed, even with your own daughter. The accusation hit Catherine like a slap. She paled visibly, taking a step back. How dare you? Eleanor was my life. Was she your life or your extension? William questioned. Because I remember well how you pressured her, how you criticized every choice that didn't align with your expectations. You even resisted our marriage at first because I didn't come from a traditional enough family for your standards. That is completely irrelevant to the current situation, the lawyer interrupted, trying to regain control of the discussion. On the contrary, William retorted, it's extremely relevant. Catherine isn't concerned about my daughter's psychological well-being. She's concerned with control, with appearances, with what her friends at the country club will say. Catherine quickly composed herself, the brief moment of vulnerability replaced by a cold determination. Think what you will, William. The petition will be filed on Monday. You'll have time to reflect on your priorities. With a gesture, she indicated to the lawyer that it was time to leave. The man, visibly relieved to escape the family tension, hastily gathered his documents. One last thing, Catherine said already at the door. Have you talked to the girls about your relationship with Mrs. Evans? Do they understand that she is not, and never will be, their mother? The question, deliberately provocative, hung in the air as Catherine and the lawyer left, leaving William and Clara in a silence heavy with worry. She can't do this, Clara finally murmured, slumping onto the sofa, her legs suddenly weak. She can't just try to take your daughters away from you. William sat beside her, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. Technically, she can try. It doesn't mean she'll succeed. I have the best lawyers in the country, and no judge in their right mind would consider taking children from a loving, competent father just because he's in a relationship with someone the grandmother doesn't approve of. But there will be a process, Clara noted. There will be hearings, witnesses, experts evaluating the girls. It will be a media circus, William. Is that what you want for them? William took her hands in his. Of course not. None of this is what I want. But I also don't want to give in to Catherine's emotional blackmail. I don't want to give up the possibility of happiness, our happiness, out of fear of her threats. Clara looked at their intertwined hands, the contrast between her tanned, Calloused skin and William's paler, smoother skin, a visual metaphor for the differences between their worlds. "Maybe," she began hesitantly, "maybe it would be better if I stepped away for a while, just until this is all resolved, so as not to give Catherine more ammunition." "No," William replied firmly. "That's exactly what she wants. Divide and conquer. If you leave now, she'll see it as a victory, as confirmation that she can control our lives through threats." "But the girls." "The girls need you," he interrupted gently. "They're finally recovering from the trauma. Pushing you away now could reverse all their progress." At that moment, as if summoned by the mention, the twins' voices echoed down the hall. They ran into the living room, their hair still damp from the pool, their little faces flushed with sun and excitement. "Daddy, Clara! Is Grandma gone?" Charlotte asked, casting a cautious look around, as if afraid her grandmother might jump out from behind a curtain at any moment. "Yes, Princess, she's gone," William replied, forcing a smile. "Good," exclaimed Amelia, climbing onto the sofa between the adults. "She was very angry today. She made that face she makes when she doesn't like something." "You saw her?" Clara asked, surprised. Charlotte nodded solemnly. "We saw her from the bedroom window when she arrived with that man in the suit. Mrs. Gable said we shouldn't come down, that it was adult talk." "And you obeyed?" William questioned, raising an eyebrow. The girls exchanged a conspiratorial look. "Sort of," Amelia admitted. "We listened a little from the stairs." William and Clara exchanged worried glances. How much had the children overheard? "What did you hear, little ones?" Clara asked softly. "That Grandma is angry because you and Daddy are friends," Charlotte replied with the disconcerting frankness of children. "But that's silly, isn't it? Adults can be friends." William breathed a sigh of relief. Apparently, the twins hadn't grasped the more disturbing aspects of the discussion. "Yes, my love, adults can be friends," he confirmed, "and sometimes other adults don't understand those friendships. Like when Lily didn't like it when I played with Sophie," Amelia compared, referring to a situation in her kindergarten class. "Something like that," William smiled, impressed by his daughter's insight. "Did Grandma say you're going to live?" "With us, Clara?" Charlotte asked suddenly, looking hopefully at the housekeeper. "Because that would be so cool. You could tell us stories every night, not just when you're working." Clara's heart ached at the innocent question. "It's not quite like that, sweetie. Your grandmother is. Confused about a few things." "But you like us, don't you?" Amelia insisted. "And Daddy too?" "Of course I do," Clara answered honestly. "I like all three of you very much." "Then why can't you live here?" Charlotte questioned, with the simple but irrefutable logic of children. William intervened, sensing Clara's discomfort. "You know, girls, adult relationships are complicated. There are a lot of things to consider." "Like what?" Amelia asked, tilting her head curiously. "Like," William searched for an explanation suitable for a 5-year-old, "like the fact that Clara is an employee here, and there are rules about employees and bosses living together." The twins looked confused. "But Mrs. Gable lives here," Charlotte pointed out. "It's different," William replied, beginning to realize he had entered tricky territory. "Why?" Amelia insisted. Clara decided to step in, recognizing William's dilemma. "Girls, what do you say we go get a snack? Brenda made those cookies you love." The mention of cookies immediately diverted the twins' attention, and they jumped excitedly from the sofa, the previous topic momentarily forgotten. As she accompanied them to the kitchen, Clara exchanged a final look with William, a silent communication that said more than words. The situation was even more complicated than they had imagined. That night, while the girls slept and the mansion fell silent, Clara found William in the second-floor library. He was sitting in one of the leather armchairs, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze lost in the flames of the fireplace. "They're asleep," Clara reported softly, remaining at the doorway. "They asked you to go give them a good-night kiss when you're done thinking important thoughts, as they put it." William smiled, despite the evident worry on his face. "They're so perceptive. Sometimes I forget they're only 5. That's how children are." Clara agreed, still hesitant to fully enter the room, aware they were alone in an intimate setting. After working hours, William noticed her hesitation. Please come in. We need to talk. Clara moved forward, sitting in the armchair opposite his. Have you spoken to your lawyer? Yes, William confirmed, taking a sip of his drink. Mr. Martins thinks Catherine's case is weak, legally speaking, but he sighed. He also thinks she has enough resources to turn this into a long and painful battle. That the media will certainly be interested in the story of the millionaire widower, the housekeeper and the vengeful mother-in-law. His words. Not mine. Clara nodded, her stomach clenching at the mental image of tabloids, gossip, and the girls eventually being exposed to it all. What does he recommend? She asked, though she feared the answer. William hesitated, swirling the glass between his fingers. He suggested a middle ground, something that partially satisfies Catherine without us completely giving in to her demands. What kind of middle ground? The change in the current dynamic, William explained, choosing his words carefully. You would leave the position of housekeeper to eliminate the boss-employee angle that worries Catherine so much. We would get an apartment for you, as we discussed before, and we would keep our relationship more discreet for now. The girls would continue to see you regularly, but in a different context. Clara considered the proposal, biting her lip thoughtfully. And what about my debts? Without the job here, I would take care of them, William replied promptly. I know your pride might resist, but think of it as an advance for everything you've done for my daughters, for my family. Clara looked up, meeting his eyes. I didn't do it for money, William. I know, he assured her. That's exactly why I want to help. Because you never asked, never expected anything in return. A comfortable silence settled between them as Clara processed the proposal, its implications, the future that was unfolding before her, so different from anything she had imagined when she accepted the housekeeper job a few months ago. And what if it doesn't work out? She finally asked, voicing her greatest fear. What if we discover that what we felt was just gratitude mistaken for attraction, extraordinary circumstances creating a connection that won't survive the real world? William placed his glass on the side table and leaned forward, shortening the distance between them. It's a risk, yes, but I believe what we have is deeper than that. It's not just physical attraction or gratitude or circumstances. It's a recognition, Clara, as if something in me recognizes something in you beyond all the superficial differences. His words touched Clara deeply, echoing her own unspoken thoughts. I feel the same, she admitted softly, and it scares me, because I never imagined feeling this again after Michael, because it feels almost like a betrayal to allow myself to love again. It's not a betrayal, William assured her. Michael wouldn't want to see you living half a life, denying yourself the chance to be happy again, just as I know Eleanor wouldn't want to see me doing the same. Silent tears began to stream down Clara's face. I want to try, she whispered. I want to believe we deserve this second chance. William stood up, kneeling before her, taking her hands in his. Then let's try together, one step at a time. In that moment, so close to each other, the tension that had been building between them for weeks finally became irresistible. William raised his hand, gently touching Clara's face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. She closed her eyes, leaning almost imperceptibly into his touch. When their lips finally met, it was not with the unbridled urgency of passion, but with the solemn delicacy of a new beginning. A kiss that sealed a pact, a promise, a silent declaration of intent. We'll make this work, William murmured against her lips. No matter what Catherine does, no matter what the world thinks, we'll find a way. Clara nodded, allowing herself for the first time in a long time to believe that happiness was not just a distant dream, but a real, tangible possibility within her grasp. What neither of them knew, as they lost themselves in that moment of deep connection, was that the storm Catherine had promised was just beginning, and that it would take much more than good intentions and sincere feelings to face what was to come. The days following the confrontation with Catherine brought swift changes to the lives of everyone in the Harrison mansion. Following the lawyer's advice, William found an elegant apartment for Clara in Santa Monica, an upper-middle-class neighborhood not far from the Beverly Hills mansion. It was a small but sophisticated place, with 2 bedrooms, a balcony, and a partial view of the Pacific Ocean, too luxurious for what Clara was used to, but modest by William's standards. It's too much, she protested upon visiting the property for the first time, observing the marble finishes and designer light fixtures. "I don't need this much." "It's the least I can offer," William replied, watching her reaction with a mix of amusement and tenderness. "Besides, it needs to be a place where the girls can visit you comfortably." The mention of the twins silenced any further objections. The idea of having a space where she could receive them, create new memories with them outside the context of the mansion, was simply irresistible. At the mansion, Margaret was tasked with finding a replacement for the housekeeper position. The news of Clara's departure caused a stir among the staff, who in a few short months had grown accustomed to her gentle yet efficient leadership. No one dared to openly comment on the rumors of a possible relationship between her and the boss, but the exchanged glances, the hushed whispers that stopped when William or Clara entered a room, made it clear that everyone suspected the truth. Explaining the change to the twins was the most delicate part. On a Sunday afternoon, William gathered his daughters in the second-floor playroom with Clara by his side. The girls, sensing the seriousness on the adults' faces, immediately abandoned their toys. "We have some news to share," William began, choosing his words carefully. "Clara will no longer be working here as the housekeeper." The twins' little faces immediately contorted into expressions of alarm and sadness. "Are you leaving?" asked Charlotte, her voice small and frightened. "No, sweetie," Clara quickly clarified. "I just won't be working or living here anymore. I'll have my own apartment not too far away. You can visit me whenever you want." "But why?" Amelia insisted, confusion evident in her green eyes. "Don't you like our house anymore?" William and Clara exchanged a look, the silent communication of two adults trying to navigate delicate terrain. "It's not that at all," William explained. "It's just that Clara and we've become very special friends, and when adults become special friends, it's better that they don't work together." The twins frowned simultaneously, processing this information. "Special friends like boyfriend and girlfriend?" asked Charlotte, surprising the adults with her insight. William hesitated for only a second. "Yes, something like that. We're getting to know each other better, seeing if we can be a family in a different way." A brief silence followed, the girls seemingly absorbing the news. Then, to the complete surprise of the adults, they both broke into radiant smiles. "Does that mean Clara is going to be our mom?" asked Amelia, the hope so palpable in her voice it broke Clara's heart. "No, sweetie," she explained gently, kneeling to be at their level. "You already have a mom, Eleanor, who loved you so very much and will always be your mom, even though she's a little star in the sky now. No one can replace her, nor would I want to try." "But my friend Lily has two moms," Charlotte argued. "The one she was born from and the new one who married her dad later." William almost choked on the simplicity of the childish logic. "It's a different situation, Princess. Let's take it slow, okay? For now, Clara is a very special friend who loves you very much and whom I also like very much. The rest we'll see with time." The girls seemed to accept this explanation, though their shrewd little eyes made it clear they understood more than the adults would have liked. In the black and white world of children, the ambiguities and complications of adult relationships were simplified to essential truths. People who love each other stay together. Families are formed in many ways, and when someone makes you happy, you keep them close. The following Monday, as promised, Catherine's lawyer formally filed the petition for joint custody at the Los Angeles County Courthouse. The news reached William through Mr. Martins, who appeared at the mansion with a briefcase full of documents. "As we expected," the lawyer explained, "a middle-aged man with decades of experience in family law. She's alleging concerns about the children's emotional and psychological well-being, citing the trauma of their mother's loss and the confusion caused by your relationship with the former housekeeper." William sat heavily behind his desk, frustration evident in every line of his face. "How bad is it, honestly?" Mr. Martins adjusted his glasses, choosing his words carefully. "In strictly legal terms, her case is weak. You are an exemplary father. The girls are clearly well cared for. There is absolutely no evidence of neglect or abuse. But," William pressed, sensing there was more. "But family courts are unpredictable," the lawyer continued. "And Catherine is an influential woman, with connections all over Los Angeles. The judge assigned to the case, Judge Lawrence, already knows her from social circles." I'm not suggesting anything unethical, of course, but personal relationships can influence perceptions. So she could actually get custody of my daughters? William asked, a chill forming in his stomach. Full custody? Extremely unlikely, the lawyer assured him. Joint custody? Possible, if she can convince the court that there is significant emotional instability in the current domestic environment. And I must add, the media coverage won't help. The story of a millionaire widower involved with the housekeeper, while the maternal grandmother fights for custody of her orphaned granddaughters is, well, it's front-page material. William ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of that reality. And what is your recommendation? We have a few options, Mr. Martins replied, opening his briefcase. We can fight with all our might, expose every flaw in Catherine's argument, find witnesses to attest to her controlling and manipulative character. It would be effective, but potentially destructive for everyone involved, especially the girls. Or, William asked, anticipating the alternative, or we can seek an out-of-court settlement. Offer Catherine some kind of formal participation in her granddaughters' lives, specific days of the week, a few weekends a month, involvement in educational decisions, in exchange for her dropping the lawsuit. William considered the options, his face tense with the dilemma. And what about Clara? Catherine will certainly demand that I end any relationship with her. The lawyer closed his briefcase, his expression compassionate. That's the hardest part, Mr. Harrison. You will need to decide what or who is the absolute priority in your life right now. The answer was obvious, of course. The girls, always the girls. But the idea of giving up Clara, of renouncing the chance at happiness he had just begun to glimpse, was too painful to contemplate. I need time, he said finally. To think, to talk with Clara. Mr. Martins nodded understandingly. Naturally. But don't take too long. In family court, as in the media, the one who makes the first move often sets the tone of the game. That same evening, William drove to Clara's new apartment, carrying the weight of that conversation. He found her still unpacking, surrounded by half-open boxes, the impersonal apartment gaining touches of her personality, with each object put in its place. A handmade quilt over the sofa, a small collection of colored stones lined up on the sideboard, simply framed photographs of her hometown. When she opened the door wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair in a messy ponytail, a smudge of dust on her cheek, William felt a wave of certainty. No matter what came, he couldn't lose this woman again. You look so serious, she observed after greeting him with a soft kiss. Did something happen? Sitting on the newly furnished balcony, overlooking a nighttime view of Los Angeles that would have been inspiring on any other occasion, William told her about the lawyer's visit, the options presented, the impossible decision that loomed before him. You don't have to say another word, Clara interrupted when he began to talk about priorities. I know exactly what needs to be done. Clara, The girls come first, she declared firmly. Always. There's no argument there. What Catherine is doing is cruel, but what matters is protecting Charlotte and Amelia from more trauma. William watched her, once again marveling at her strength, her moral clarity, her ability to put the needs of others above her own. So you think we should end this? He asked, the pain evident in his voice. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the city lights below. I think we should do whatever is necessary to protect the children. If that means staying apart for a while, until everything is legally resolved, then that's what we'll do. And what if it's never resolved? William questioned. What if Catherine just keeps using the girls as pawns in her game of manipulation for the rest of their lives? A heavy silence settled between them, the question hanging in the Los Angeles night air. Finally, Clara turned to face him, a firm resolution in her eyes. Then we'll face it together, because giving up completely would be giving her exactly what she wants. William took her hands in his, feeling the slight roughness of her fingers, which, despite all the recent changes, still bore the marks of a life of hard work. We'll need to be patient, he said, cautious. Give Catherine the impression that we've given in, while we work behind the scenes to build a solid case against her accusations. Clara nodded slowly. That means seeing each other less, at least publicly. For now, William confirmed, until we have a better strategy. The plan seemed logical, rational, the only viable option under the circumstances. But when William kissed her before leaving, there was a shared desperation in that touch, the unspoken fear that greater forces could separate them permanently, that their newfound love could be suffocated before it even had a chance to fully bloom. In the days that followed, the plan was put into action. William agreed to meet with Catherine and her lawyer to discuss the terms of a possible out-of-court settlement. As expected, his mother-in-law's first demand was the complete removal of Clara from the family's life. "She is to have no contact with the girls," Catherine stated imperiously, seated in the law firm's conference room. "Not now, not ever." William maintained an impassive expression, playing the part they had agreed upon. "That's extreme, Catherine. Clara has formed genuine bonds with the girls. An abrupt cut-off could be traumatic for them. More traumatic than the confusion of having a substitute for their mother," she retorted coldly. "No, William. On this point I cannot yield. If you want to avoid a public and painful lawsuit, you will have to remove that woman completely." After hours of tense negotiation, they reached a stalemate. William would agree to let Catherine have the granddaughters for 2 weekends a month at her house in Santa Barbara, in addition to a weekly visit to the mansion. He would also consult her on important decisions related to the children's education and health. In return, she would withdraw the custody lawsuit. As for Clara, a vague compromise was reached. She would not frequent the mansion or have contact with the girls for an adjustment period to be determined. William knew it was a temporary concession, a maneuver to buy time, but still, verbalizing that agreement left a bitter taste in his mouth. "I don't trust you, William," Catherine said as they were leaving. "I know you're still seeing that woman in secret, but be warned, I have eyes everywhere. If I find out you're still involved with her, especially if you involve my granddaughters in this inappropriate relationship, no agreement will save you." William merely gave a brief nod, afraid that any response would reveal the anger simmering beneath his apparent composure. Deep down, he knew Catherine was right in her suspicion. He had no intention of giving up Clara permanently, only of buying time until he found a definitive solution. The preliminary agreement was signed, and the custody case was temporarily suspended. On the surface, Catherine had won. William was abiding by the terms. The visits were happening as agreed, and Clara was keeping her distance from the mansion and the children. But behind the scenes, a more complex plan was underway. Mr. Martins, with Margaret's discreet help, hired a private investigator to gather information on Catherine's past, her relationship with her late daughter, possible covered-up scandals, anything that could be used as leverage if the situation deteriorated again. Meanwhile, William and Clara continued to meet in secret, not at her apartment, which was easily watched, but in unlikely places, a simple inn in the California countryside, the home of a loyal friend of William's on Catalina Island, an anonymous flat rented under a false name near LAX. They were brief encounters, filled with longing and uncertainty, but they served to keep the flame they had lit alive. The girls, however, missed Clara intensely. The new housekeeper, Mrs. Noguera, was competent and kind, but she didn't have that special connection Clara had established with Charlotte and Amelia. The twins frequently asked about her, and William found himself fabricating increasingly elaborate excuses. Clara was traveling. She was busy with her new job, a necessary lie, as he was actually still supporting her financially. She would visit soon when things calmed down. "When, Daddy?" Charlotte would insist one night as he put them to bed. "When can Clara come back?" "Soon, Princess," he would promise, hating himself a little more with each new lie. Very soon. What none of them knew was that fate was about to intervene in an unexpected way, completely altering the course of their story and bringing long-buried truths to light, truths that would forever change the dynamic between William, Clara, and Catherine. 4 months had passed since the agreement with Catherine. 4 long months in which life at the Harrison mansion had settled into a new routine. More organized, perhaps calmer on the surface, but devoid of the genuine joy that Clara had brought with her. The twins continued to talk and play, but there was a restraint in their smiles, as if they instinctively understood that something important had been taken from them. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the girls were preparing for another weekend at their grandmother's house in Santa Barbara. William watched them from the doorway as Mrs. Gable packed their small bags. the twins sitting silently on the bed, exchanging glances that carried a secret communication, that special connection that only twins seem to share. "Are you excited to see Grandma?" he asked, trying to sound enthusiastic. Charlotte shrugged, a surprisingly adult gesture for a 5-year-old. "Sort of." "Her house is pretty," Amelia added without much conviction, "but it's very cold up there and she never lets us run inside." William felt a pang of guilt. Since the agreement, the visits to Catherine had become a constant, and it was clear the girls didn't fully enjoy them. The grandmother, with her formal style and strict rules, provided a very different environment from the warm home he and Clara had begun to build. "It's only for 2 days," he reminded them gently. "And when you get back, I have a surprise for you." Their little faces immediately lit up. What is it?" they asked in unison. William smiled mysteriously. "If I tell you, it won't be a surprise, will it? Now finish packing. Mrs. Gable needs to take you to the airport soon." Leaving his daughters in the nanny's care, William went down to his office, where Margaret awaited him with a folder of documents. The ever-efficient secretary had become his main ally in recent months, helping to coordinate not only his business, but also his secret meetings with Clara and the investigation into Catherine. "Any news?" he asked as soon as he closed the door. Margaret nodded, her eyes shining with what seemed to be restrained excitement. "The investigator found something, sir. Something big." She opened the folder, revealing carefully organized photographs and documents. Apparently, Mrs. Beaumont is not as exemplary as she would have everyone believe. About 15 years ago, she had an affair with a married man, a well-known politician. William frowned, not seeing how that could help them. "That was a long time ago, Margaret, and infidelity, while morally questionable, is hardly a crime." "It's not the affair itself that matters, sir," Margaret continued, clearly eager to get to the point. "It's what happened afterward." The politician ended the relationship when his wife found out, and 3 months later, when he announced his candidacy for governor, he received a series of threatening emails. If he didn't pay a significant sum, certain compromising photographs would be sent to the press. "Blackmail," William muttered, beginning to understand. "And these emails?" "They came from Catherine." "Not directly," Margaret explained, "but our investigator found bank transfers from the politician's offshore account to a shell company, registered in the name of the late Mr. Beaumont, Mrs. Beaumont's husband. 3 transfers over 6 months, totaling more than $500,000. William sat down slowly, absorbing the information. "That's explosive. Catherine and her husband blackmailed a politician using evidence of her own extramarital affair." "Exactly," Margaret confirmed. "And the investigator believes it wasn't an isolated incident. There are indications of at least 2 other similar schemes, though with less documentation available." "My God," William murmured, running a hand through his hair. "Did Eleanor know about this? About her parents' blackmail schemes?" Margaret hesitated. "We're not sure. But the investigator found something interesting in the records of the clinic where she was in therapy." "You accessed Eleanor's medical records?" William asked, alarmed. "Not the records themselves," Margaret quickly clarified. "That would be illegal. Just the information that she started attending the clinic 3 months before the accident. And she increased the frequency of her sessions in the weeks leading up to it." William absorbed that information, a knot forming in his stomach. He had never known Eleanor was in therapy before her fall. She had never mentioned it, never given any indication of emotional problems. What else had his wife hidden from him? What burden had she carried alone? "This changes everything," he said finally. "With this information, we can confront Catherine, force her to leave Clara alone, to give up any future attempts to get custody of the girls." "Blackmail with blackmail?" Margaret questioned, a note of concern in her voice. "Are you sure, sir?" William shook his head. "Not exactly. I don't want to stoop to her level, but I can make her understand that she's not the only one with weapons in this game. That if she continues to interfere in our lives, certain information could come to light." Meanwhile, in her Santa Monica apartment, Clara was undergoing her own transformation. The months of forced separation from the twins had been painful, but they had also given her time to reflect, to rediscover parts of herself that had been buried by grief and debt. With William's financial support, which she had finally accepted after much insistence, She had enrolled in a distance learning education course. It had always been her dream, interrupted by personal tragedy, and now she finally had the opportunity to pursue it. In her spare time, she volunteered at a children's shelter downtown, where her natural ability to connect with traumatized little ones worked wonders. "You should see how they respond to her," the shelter coordinator commented to a colleague, watching Clara lead a storytelling activity. "It's like she has a gift." On that particular afternoon, as she was getting ready for another secret meeting with William, this time at a discreet restaurant in the valley, far from the social circles of the LA elite, Clara received an unexpected call. "Hello?" she answered, not recognizing the number. "Clara?" "It's Mrs. Gable." Clara's heart raced. Mrs. Gable, the twins' nanny, had never called before. The agreement with Catherine practically forbade any contact between her and the mansion's staff. If the nanny was breaking that rule, something serious must have happened. "Mrs. Gable? Is everything all right?" "The girls, they're fine," the nanny quickly assured her. "Physically, at least. But there's something you need to know, something I can no longer keep in good conscience." Mrs. Gable's voice trembled slightly. "It's about Mrs. Beaumont, about what she's been telling the girls during these weekends in Santa Barbara." A chill ran down Clara's spine. What has she been saying? Mrs. Gable took a deep breath before continuing. "She's been saying terrible things about you, that you only got close to Mr. Harrison for his money, that you pretended to like them to manipulate them, that you somehow contributed to their mother's accident." "What?" Clara exclaimed, horrified. "That's absurd. I didn't even know Eleanor. I wasn't even working there when it happened." "I know," Mrs. Gable agreed. "It's a cruel lie. But the girls are small, impressionable, and since their grandmother says it with such conviction, with such authority—" "Did they believe her?" Clara asked, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm not sure. They seem confused. They ask a lot of questions. Last night I heard Charlotte crying in her room, telling her sister that she missed you, but she was scared because Grandma said you were a bad person." Clara's heart broke at the thought of the emotional conflict of the children she loved so much. "Why are you telling me this, Mrs. Gable? Why now?" "Because I can't stand by and watch in silence anymore," the nanny replied with renewed firmness. "Those children have been through enough trauma. They were finally recovering thanks to you, and now this. It's not fair, it's not right. Mr. Harrison needs to know what's happening when the girls are in their grandmother's care." Clara thanked Mrs. Gable for her courage, promising to relay the information to William immediately. Hanging up the phone, she sat on the edge of her bed, her legs suddenly weak. Catherine's calculated cruelty had reached a new level. Not content with pushing her away from the family, she was now trying to poison the children's minds against her, using their innocence as a weapon. That night, when she met William at the arranged restaurant, Clara could barely hold back her tears as she recounted her conversation with Mrs. Gable. She watched his face transform, first in shock, then in disbelief, and finally into a cold fury she had never witnessed before. "This ends tonight," he declared, his voice low but filled with determination. "No more games, no more deals, no more concessions. She has crossed the final line." "What are you going to do?" Clara asked, frightened by the intensity of his reaction. "What I should have done months ago," he replied. "Fight, with every weapon I have." The next morning, while the twins were still in Santa Barbara, William called an emergency meeting with Mr. Martins. He presented him with both the new evidence about Catherine's past and the information about her psychological manipulation of her granddaughters. "This is serious," the lawyer agreed after hearing everything. "Parental alienation is a serious offense. If we can prove that she is deliberately trying to turn the children against people they love, using lies and emotional manipulation, any judge would consider that detrimental to their well-being. And what about the evidence of blackmail? Can we use that?" Mr. Martins pondered. "Not directly in court. It's too old and not directly related to the custody issue. But as a out-of-court persuasion, yes, it certainly has value." The plan that followed was executed with military precision. First, William cancelled the twins' return, informing Catherine that he was extending their visit by another day for urgent matters. Then, Mr. Martins filed an emergency petition alleging attempted parental alienation, requesting the immediate suspension of unsupervised visits pending a full psychological evaluation. Simultaneously, William drove to Santa Barbara himself, accompanied by Margaret, who carried a folder with all the evidence collected on the blackmail schemes. The final confrontation was about to happen. Catherine's elegant country house, with its European architecture and perfectly manicured gardens, stood imposingly against the mountain sky. When William's car pulled up to the entrance, the twins were playing in the garden under the supervision of a staff member, while their grandmother watched from a covered veranda. "Daddy!" they shouted in unison upon seeing him, running towards him with open arms. William knelt to receive them in a tight hug, feeling comforted by his daughter's touch, by the certainty of their unconditional love. "Did you miss me?" "A lot," replied Charlotte. "Grandma said you were only coming tomorrow," added Amelia, curiosity evident in her green eyes. "Change of plans," William explained simply. "Actually, we're all going home today. I have a surprise waiting there." The girls exchanged excited glances, but before they could ask more, Catherine approached, her face a mask of control that barely concealed her irritation. "William, what a surprise! We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Girls," he said, ignoring his mother-in-law's comment, "why don't you go with Margaret to the car? She has some candy she brought especially for you." When the children excitedly walked away with the secretary, William turned to Catherine. "We need to talk. In private." The matriarch's artificial smile wavered for an instant. "Of course. Let's go inside." In the luxurious living room of the house, with its decor that blended European antiques and American art, William wasted no time on pleasantries. He placed a folder identical to the one Margaret was carrying on the coffee table. "I know what you've been doing to the girls, Catherine. The lies you've been telling about Clara, the manipulations." The woman stiffened but maintained her haughty posture. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to protect my granddaughters from harmful influences. By lying to them. By telling them that Clara was somehow responsible for Eleanor's accident when she wasn't even working for us at the time. Is that protection or revenge?" A blush crept up Catherine's cheeks. "The children need to know the truth about that opportunist." "The truth," William repeated with a dry laugh. "Interesting you should mention that." He pushed the folder towards her. "Because there are some truths about you, Catherine, that I'm sure you'd prefer to keep buried." With evident reluctance, Catherine opened the folder. Her face drained of color as she flipped through the pages, recognizing photographs, documents, bank statements that told a very different story from the public image she had cultivated for decades. "Where did you get this?" she finally asked, her voice reduced to a whisper. "Does it matter? What's relevant is that I have enough proof to destroy your carefully constructed reputation. Imagine the newspapers, Catherine. Respected philanthropist involved in blackmail schemes. Your friends at the club, your contacts in high society, they would all know." Catherine closed the folder forcefully, her eyes blazing with fury and fear. "This is blackmail." "No," William corrected calmly. "This is negotiation. I'm simply leveling the playing field. You threatened what I love most, so now you know the consequences of continuing down this path. What do you want? For you to completely withdraw the custody petition? For you to stop trying to poison my daughters against Clara? For you to accept, once and for all, that you cannot control our lives?" Catherine stood up abruptly, walking to the window that offered a view of the gardens where the girls were now chatting excitedly with Margaret. "You don't understand, do you?" she said without turning around. "It was never about you or even about that woman. It was about Eleanor, about preserving her legacy, ensuring her daughters grew up knowing who she was, that they wouldn't replace her with some random stranger." There was a vulnerability in Catherine's voice that surprised William, a glimpse of the genuine pain beneath the cold facade. "Eleanor was all I had," she continued, her voice nearly breaking. "My only true success. All those schemes, those manipulations you uncovered. I did it for her, to secure her future, her position. And then she was gone so suddenly, and the girls are all that's left of her in the world." William felt his anger slightly subside, replaced by a reluctant understanding. "Catherine, no one is trying to erase Eleanor from the girls' memory. Clara would be the first to ensure they always knew who their mother was, that they honored her." "How can you be so sure?" Catherine questioned, finally turning to face him. How do you know she isn't just waiting for the right moment to completely take Eleanor's place? Because I know her, William replied simply. Because I've seen how she treats the children, with respect, with honesty, allowing them to express all their feelings, including missing their mother. Catherine seemed to ponder those words. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the antique clock in the corner. Eleanor was never happy, you know, she said abruptly, even before the accident. She smiled, of course, played her part, but there was something missing, something that neither you nor I could fill. The revelation hit William like a punch. Why are you telling me this now? Because maybe I'm tired, Catherine admitted, suddenly looking much older. Tired of fighting, of manipulating, of trying to control what can't be controlled. Because I've seen how the girls light up when they talk about Clara, even when I try to make them fear her. And because, she hesitated, as if the next words were physically painful, because Eleanor deserved more than she lived. And maybe, just maybe, her daughters deserve a chance she never had, the chance to grow up in a truly happy home. William looked at his mother-in-law with new eyes, noticing for the first time the deep lines of exhaustion on her face, the weight of years of control and manipulation on her shoulders. What are you saying, Catherine? I'm saying I will withdraw the custody petition, she replied, pride still present in her posture despite the defeat. With some conditions, of course. I still want to visit the girls regularly. I want to be a part of their lives, meet their teachers, attend their school performances. That was always guaranteed, William assured her. I never wanted to keep you from your granddaughters. I just wanted you to respect my rights as their father. And what about Clara? Catherine asked, the name still difficult on her lips. She will be back in our lives, William declared without hesitation. At a pace that is best for the children, but she will be back. It's non-negotiable. Catherine nodded slowly, accepting the inevitable. You really love her, don't you? It's not just convenience or gratitude. I really love her, William confirmed. And more importantly, the girls love her too. A contemplative silence followed that declaration. Finally, Catherine reached for the folder on the table, closing it definitively. Keep this, she said. It won't be necessary. My word should be enough. As William watched his mother-in-law's transformation, not a complete surrender certainly, but the beginning of an armistice, he felt a weight being lifted from his shoulders. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be adjustments and difficult moments, but the biggest barrier was finally beginning to crumble. On the drive back to Los Angeles, with the twins sleeping in the back seat, exhausted from the day's excitement, William allowed himself, for the first time in months, to envision a future without shadows, a future where his family, unconventional but deeply loving, could finally flourish in the daylight without fear or shame. Upon arriving at the mansion, the promised surprise was waiting. Clara was there, anxious and nervous, waiting in the living room. The twins, momentarily paralyzed upon seeing her, soon burst into shouts of joy, running to hug her, as if they would never let her go again. You're back. You're back, they repeated between tears and laughter. I'm back, my loves, Clara confirmed, kneeling to hug them properly. And this time I'm not going anywhere. Over the girls' heads her eyes met William's, a silent question, a cautious hope. He nodded, a smile transforming his face. It's true, he confirmed. Clara is coming back into our lives, permanently, if that's what you want too. Yes, the twins exclaimed in unison, clinging even tighter to the woman who had brought light back into their lives. Later that night, with the girls finally asleep, after hours of stories and updates on everything they had missed during the months of separation, William and Clara found themselves on the second-floor balcony, watching the garden bathed in moonlight. I still can't believe it worked, Clara confessed. That Catherine just gave in, William smiled, wrapping an arm around her. It wasn't exactly just. Let's just say we had a long and revealing conversation. I think deep down she wants what's best for the girls. We just deeply disagreed on what that best was. And now? Now we start over, he replied, turning to face her completely. No secrets, no games, no fears. Just us building something new together. Clara smiled, finally allowing herself to believe that happiness was not just a fleeting dream, but a tangible possibility. You know, when I lost Michael and our daughter, I thought I would never feel true joy again. that I would carry that emptiness forever. And now, William asked softly, touching her face with reverence. Now I know the heart has an infinite capacity to expand, that I don't have to forget the past to embrace the future, that it's possible to honor those we've lost by loving those we've found. William leaned in, sealing those words with a kiss that carried promises of all the tomorrows they would have together. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be adjustments, arguments, moments of doubt. Catherine would need time to fully accept the new dynamic. The girls would have questions and insecurities. There would be judgmental looks from society, malicious comments, unexpected obstacles, but none of that mattered compared to the certainty that now filled their hearts. The certainty that together they had found something rare and precious, a second chance. A new family, built not just by blood ties, but by conscious choices, by deliberate love, by shared healing. 2 years later, on a sunny Sunday, the garden of the Harrison mansion was decorated with white flowers and colorful ribbons. Elegantly dressed guests occupied chairs arranged in a semicircle, all facing a small, improvised altar under the same mango tree where, so long ago, William and Clara had shared their first revealing picnic. Charlotte and Amelia, now 7, wearing identical pastel dresses, scattered rose petals down the aisle. Their radiant smiles reflected the pure joy of the moment. Behind them, Catherine watched with a serene expression that few would have thought possible years ago. It was not the effusive happiness of someone celebrating without reservation, but the quiet acceptance of someone who had finally found peace with the inevitable. William waited at the altar, elegant in his light-colored suit, his eyes fixed on the path where Clara would soon appear. His face reflected a mix of emotions, joy, anticipation, gratitude, and that specific vulnerability of one who risks their heart again after knowing the pain of loss. When the soft music began, and Clara appeared at the start of the aisle, a collective sigh went through the assembly. She wasn't wearing traditional white, opting for a champagne-colored dress that complemented her skin tone and perfectly framed her silhouette, now visibly rounded by advanced pregnancy. As she walked slowly towards William, Clara reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her there. From a desperate, indebted widow to the future wife of William Sterling Harrison and mother to his daughters, both the twins she loved as her own, and the baby growing in her womb, a miracle no doctor had predicted. The specialists had been categorical. The damage from the accident was irreversible. She could never conceive. But life, in its infinite wisdom and mystery, had proven them wrong. The pregnancy, discovered 6 months after their reconciliation, had been met with shock, disbelief, and finally, an almost sacred joy. A miracle, the doctor had declared, unable to scientifically explain how it had been possible. The twins had received the news with absolute enthusiasm. "A little brother," they exclaimed, already planning all the games they would teach the baby. To them, it was just another confirmation of what they already knew instinctively, that their family was special, blessed in ways that transcended common understanding. Even Catherine, after the initial shock, had found it in herself to celebrate the new life. Eleanor would be happy, she had told William in a rare moment of vulnerability. She always wanted the girls to have siblings. Now, as Clara reached the altar where William awaited her, her eyes shone with unshed tears. He reached out his hands to receive her, and she noticed they were trembling slightly too. "You look beautiful," he whispered. The officiant began the ceremony with words about second chances, about the capacity of love to transcend pain, about families formed not just by blood, but by the deliberate choice to love and care for one another. When it was time for the vows, William spoke first, his voice clear and firm. "Clara, you entered our house as an employee and transformed it into a home. You gave my daughters back their voices, hope back to my heart, and joy back to our daily lives. I promise to honor this extraordinary gift every day by being the partner you deserve, the father our children need, the man I aspire to be. I don't promise perfection, but I promise presence, commitment, and a love that chooses you again with every new dawn." Clara took a deep breath, containing her emotion before she spoke. "William, when I lost everything I loved, I thought my capacity to love had died too. You and your daughters proved me wrong, that the heart has an infinite capacity to expand, to find room for new loves without diminishing the old ones. I promise to care for this family we've built with all the strength and tenderness I possess. I promise to honor the memory of those who came before, celebrate the present we share, and build with you a future where we can all fully blossom. The rings were exchanged, the final words were spoken, and when the officiant declared them officially married, a wave of applause and congratulations rose from the guests. The twins ran to hug them, forming a family circle, perfect in its imperfection, complete in its continuous evolution. During the reception that followed, as guests danced and celebrated, one particular moment stood out. Catherine approached Clara, who was resting on a garden bench, stroking her prominent belly. "He's active today," the matriarch commented, indicating the baby bump. Clara smiled. "Yes, he seems excited about the party. The doctors say he could be born any day now." A comfortable silence settled between the two women. Not friends, certainly, but no longer adversaries. After a moment, Catherine spoke. "You know, for a long time I thought loving Eleanor meant protecting her place, ensuring no one ever replaced her." She paused, watching the twins dance happily with William. "Now I understand that the greatest tribute to her memory is seeing her daughters happy, loved, and flourishing. And they are, thanks to you." Before Clara could respond to that unexpected admission, she felt a strong contraction, different from the Braxton Hicks she had experienced in recent weeks. Her face must have revealed the pain because Catherine immediately straightened up, alert. "Clara? Is it starting?" She nodded, unable to speak as the contraction peaked. When it finally passed, she found the breath to say, "I think your grandson has chosen a rather dramatic moment to make his entrance." Catherine didn't correct her use of the word grandson, a silent acknowledgement of the new family dynamic. Instead, she called William with an urgent gesture, and soon the whole party was in an uproar. The guests formed an impromptu aisle as Clara, supported by William, headed to the car that would take her to the hospital. The twins, anxious and excited, bounced around them. "The baby's coming! The baby's coming!" they announced to anyone who would listen. "I'll take care of them," Catherine assured, surprising everyone with the voluntary offer. "Go and keep us updated." Hours later, in a delivery room at the best maternity hospital in Los Angeles, Clara gave birth to a healthy, strong baby boy. When the newborn's first cries filled the room, William, who had held her hand throughout the entire process, couldn't hold back his tears. "He's perfect," he murmured, watching his son being placed on Clara's chest. "Just like you." Exhausted but radiant, Clara looked at the little miracle in her arms. "What should we name him?" William hesitated for a moment. "I was thinking, Michael," he said softly. "Michael Harrison Evans, in honor of the man you loved, who helped shape the extraordinary woman you've become." Clara looked at him with immeasurable gratitude and love. In that simple gesture, honoring her past while building their future together, was the essence of the man she had chosen to love. A man who understood that love was not a competition, but a continuous expansion, a mutual enrichment. "It's perfect," she agreed, kissing her son's forehead. "Michael." When the twins arrived to meet their brother, accompanied by Catherine, the recovery room transformed into the stage for a scene few would have thought possible years ago. The complete Harrison Evans family, united not just by blood and legal ties, but by the most powerful bond of all, the daily choice to love, to forgive, to grow together through life's inevitable storms. Watching William with his son in his arms, the twins excitedly pointing out the baby's tiny fingers, and even Catherine with a genuine smile on her face, Clara understood a fundamental truth. Life rarely follows the path we plan. Sometimes it takes us on painful detours, through devastating losses, into seemingly dead ends. But if we have the courage to keep going, to keep our hearts open despite the scars, eventually the path opens up again, revealing landscapes more beautiful than we could have ever imagined, not in spite of our losses, but in some mysterious way because of them. Because of everything we learned in the darkness, because of the depth and wisdom that only true pain can teach. And there, surrounded by that unlikely, imperfect, and absolutely precious family, Clara knew for sure it was worth it. Every tear, every loss, every moment of despair had been a necessary step on the journey that brought her here. To this perfect moment, to this life she could never have imagined, but which she now wouldn't trade for anything in the world. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Clara and William has touched your hearts. To embark on more exciting journeys like this one, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. You can find it at the link on the left. If this narrative stirred emotions in you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexities of life, love and second chances. Share in the comments if you have ever experienced the transformative power of a new beginning. Until next time.